Haiti is on the list of what's supposed to be. Haiti, the people who are called Haitians, predominantly are people who are classified as non-white, so they're not supposed to ever have anything under the system of white supremacy except punishment.
The UN says 1.4 million Haitians, more than 10% of the country, have fled their homes because of violence and instability. Many have crossed the border to neighboring Dominican Republic, but there they live in fear and limbo. 200,000 have even been deported back to Haiti. As part of our ongoing series on border security around the world, fellows from British Columbia University's Global Reporting Program visited the island and have this report as told by our Ali Rogan.
These cattle cars have been modified to hold dozens of migrants at a time. The Dominican Republic has ordered up trucks like this to roam the streets of towns and the countryside, filling up every day with Haitian migrants. In one of them, we met a young man named C.O.W.S, who told us he came to the Dominican Republic to work construction.
It's wrong. It's wrong. All this time that we've been here, we've been going through misery, working for nothing, working for a house to live in. How is it that I'm in jail without an arrest warrant, without having done anything?
This sweep in the Dominican Republic is part of a response to escalating gang violence and economic instability across the border in Haiti, which has escalated steadily since the assassination of Haiti's president in 2021. Last September, at a UN address, Dominican President Luis Abinader pledged that his country would not fall victim to the pressures from the crisis in Haiti.
The instability in our neighboring country has put significant pressure on our own security.
President Abinader fortified and expanded a border wall and pledged to round up 10,000 Haitians every week to secure his country from undocumented migrants. The border town of Dajabon has been the epicenter of the deportation efforts. The town's market is one of the only places Haitians are allowed to enter legally to buy and sell products. But they must leave the same day over this heavily monitored bridge. Armed Dominican border police stand guard, and there have been several incidents of violence against Haitians at this market.
It is a security issue. In Haiti, there are gang members. There are people who maintain anarchy in that country.
Farmer Santiago Rivaron is the mayor of Dajabon and has been aggressive in his stance against undocumented Haitians, even taking to the streets to violently round up sleeping migrants on his own. But while the volume of deportations back to Haiti may have skyrocketed, the border remains porous. Many migrants are known to cross back into the Dominican Republic across this river, and it's an open secret that a bribe can secure passage.
It's all about money. If you have the money, they let you go. If you don't have money, you stay. To go back, you pay a little something. You pay an immigration chief. The chief always puts someone else to do that for him.
It has become a big business, especially for some military. I cannot say that all the military are corrupt, but there are many corrupt military who receive bribes so that the border can be crossed.
The day after the Global Reporting Program team met that young Haitian construction worker, C.O.W.S, in the migration truck, they went to his home to speak with his family, only to find C.O.W.S himself back at home with his wife and baby, whose identities he asked us to conceal.
How did you get back from Haiti to the Dominican Republic?
I always pass through a waterway or go through the end of the wall, where the wall does not reach to cross through the woods. If I could survive in Haiti, I would stay. Because here we are not living. Because we are not living, we are surviving. There is no life for Haitian.
He says he's lost track of how many times he has been captured, deported, and returned.
The army, the police, anybody in a uniform, the watchman down the road, is beginning to be involved in ways which lead to extortion, corruption, and creating a chaos.
Human rights activists like Bridget Wooding have condemned Dominican treatment of Haitians. Amnesty International calls it de facto racist migration policies in violation of the country's international human rights obligations.
This particular anti-black, this particularly anti-Haitian sentiment that the authorities have attempted to whip up. There's not a rational way in which migration is being addressed, and on the contrary, it's being used as a scapegoat for a lot of ills.
It is said that we are racists. That is not true. because the majority of Dominicans have black skin, so how can there be racism? The issue that we have with our neighbors is their lack of culture. We would like them to learn from us. They should do the same thing that we do.
But even many educated professional Haitians with legal right to study or work in the Dominican Republic have reported being arbitrarily detained. Louis Jerry Wood, a Haitian studying to be a pilot in the Dominican capital Santo Domingo, was grabbed right off the street.
I was going to the market to buy something, and by surprise I encountered with this truck. One of them hit me, telling me to shut up. So I showed them about the visa, I showed them the passport, and they told me that doesn't matter, and they took me in custody and put me in this truck. So I really feel that I was discriminated, because I was black, and worse, because I was Haitian.
Louis was taken to this former recreational center, converted into a detention facility to meet the demands of the country's migrant sweeps. Outside the center, families waited for loved ones who had been detained.
I spent one night, one day without eating anything, without drinking water. I was really traumatized because it was the first time for me to have been treated this way. Because even in Haiti, there was a situation of violence. I didn't really see this stuff.
To date, Louis has been picked up 4 times, and he lives in constant fear of being detained again. And he's one of the most connected Haitian migrants in the country, having been sponsored by Alexis Victoria Yeb, a prominent senator in President Abinader's ruling party.
I learned about Louis' desire to become a pilot. It captivated me, his story, his dedication, his desire to achieve his dream. I got him a work permit, a study permit, and he is here legally with all the documents.
And while Senator Yeb says the Dominican Republic is reliant on cheap Haitian labor, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing, there's a larger national security concern.
We need Haitian labor. If they are regulated, if they have identification, we get them the work residence here. The thing is that Haiti is completely devastated, where they don't have controls over their citizens. Haiti is controlled by a terrorist gang, so we have to control our country.
This is my dream. It's my dream that one day I can see Haiti working and we would cross the border to return to our country. I have a child who's only 2 months old. I'd like to see his future. I'd like to see him grow up. I would not like to pass the misery that I am going through now.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Allie Rogan.
Ladies and gentlemen, from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina is the latest city to be targeted by the Trump administration as part of its crackdown on undocumented immigrants. Our William Brangham has more on how local officials are responding to Border Patrol agents on the city's streets.
At least 130 people were arrested this weekend as part of the crackdown, which Border Patrol officials have named Charlotte's Web, after the children's novel. Officers have already come under fire from the city's residents. One man had his truck windows smashed by agents, despite the fact that he was an American citizen. Local residents recorded agents questioning local landscapers about their immigration status. So for more on how the city is responding, we are joined now by George Dunlap. He serves as a commissioner for Mecklenburg County, which includes the city of Charlotte. Commissioner Dunlap, thank you so much for being here. Can you just tell us what is the latest, as far as you know, about these ICE raids in your community?
Well, the latest is that the ICE raids continue. As a result of that, people continue to be sheltered in their homes, almost as if though they are prisoners. People are oftentimes intimidated because of the tactics of the ICE agents, and it's just wreaking havoc in our community. One of the things I will tell you is that Charlotte spent more than 25 years developing community policing, and it's working in our community. That's when community and police collaborate, working together to reduce crime in our community. And it seems as if though in a matter of a few hours, ICE agents has turned that into rubble.
In the last few days, the man who is running these operations, Gregory Bovino, has been posting photographs of some of the people that they allege that they have been arresting. And they are saying that these people are guilty of crimes like DUIs, hit and runs, aggravated assaults. And they're arguing these people should be removed from your community and you should be grateful for this. What is your response to that?
Well, my thought is that If Border Patrol, ICE agents were doing their jobs, they would be at the border, stopping people from crossing as they suggested that they would do. Nobody's upset at the fact that they go after hardened criminals, but we have not heard any information about hardened criminals that they've arrested. None at all. I just can't help but believe that they're here to wreak havoc on the community, to divide families. People are hurting. People are upset. This community is not accustomed to that. Out of respect, I think they owe the community leaders an opportunity to engage and have conversation. If they really, really wanted to reduce crime in our community, then they should have a target focus and at least let us know what it is that they're trying to do. It's possible that they could get help if they really wanted to go after hardened criminals, but that's not what they're doing.
So you're not getting communication either on their operations, who it is that they're specifically targeting, or the people that they have been apprehending?
None at all. And, you know, as we've discussed it, a lot of the elected officials have been discussing why that is the case. And we believe that it's primarily because most of the elected officials in Charlotte are of African-American descent.
And you think that it's simply because you are Black Americans and most likely, I believe, Democrats, that the administration is choosing not to cooperate?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a little bit more? I know this is a community in Charlotte in particular that has quite a few foreign-born residents, and you described the fact that people are sheltering in place right now. What else are you hearing from people about the mood on the streets?
Well, you know, we have businesses that have closed down because they don't want their customers to come out and be subjected to brutality. The people who own laundromats, closing them down because they don't want customers to come out and be subjugated to this brutality. Grocery store owners closing down. Kids not showing up at school. Churches not having church service for fear that border agents and ICE agents will just show up.
As you know, there was a brutal stabbing of the Ukrainian woman, not by an immigrant, but several months ago, and many Republicans pointed to that as evidence that your city was a lawless, dangerous place to be. Do you think that's partly also why you were chosen?
Absolutely not. Crimes of that nature happen all across this country every day. That was an unfortunate situation where a person who had mental illness committed that act. You can't say that that represents our community. We have a loving community, as evident by the support that we provide to those people who are immigrants. They are part of the fabric of our community. They are part of our economic engine. So, no, I wouldn't suggest that that's true at all.
But you don't think that that was an excuse that was used to then send these agents?
That may be the excuse. That may be the excuse that they use, but I would say that's invalid.
All right, Commissioner George Dunlap, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
The Sierra Club is like the mountain range it is named for. The environmental nonprofit is old, 133 years to be exact, and big. At its peak a few years ago, it had almost 4 million paying members. But a new New York Times investigation reveals it is in the middle of an implosion. It has lost more than half its members, laid off a bunch of employees, and is now trying to climb out of a $40 million deficit. How did that happen? New York Times reporter David Farenthold, who covers nonprofit organizations and who won a Pulitzer investigating Donald Trump's charities, is here to tell us. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you back. Well, so, 8 years ago, things were going great for the Sierra Club. Donations skyrocketed. People were angry about Donald Trump or fearful what he might do to the environment. And a lot of that redounded to the Sierra Club. So describe what the organization was like back then and what they were focused on.
Well, focus is the right word. The Sierra Club back then was focused on the environment, and more particularly, they were focused on one specific problem, climate change. At that point, we're talking in 2016, 2017, they'd spent years working on a very focused program called Beyond Coal, and its goal was just to shut down coal-fired power plants. And they'd had a huge amount of success with that focus. They'd closed down half of the coal-fired power plants in the United States that existed when they began. And so they were at this place where they'd shown the power of focus, but then, as you said, after Trump won, they're flooded with money and people, and there comes an inflection point where they decide, like, are we going to keep staying focused, or are we going to change our strategy?
Which they did. They changed their strategy, and that had to do with the whole racial reckoning after the George Floyd murder, right?
It began before then, but accelerated. Basically, they said, we have all this money, we have all this power and, human and financial capital. We see so many other causes that are not the environment, but they are dear to us and our staffers under attack. Gay rights, trans rights, immigration, all these other things. And they said, it feels wrong to stay on the sidelines, or what they call to stay in the big green box, to just focus on environmentalism when so much else was under attack. And so they start to expand what they care about and talk about and work on. And then, you're right, after George Floyd, when the rest of the liberal movement becomes really focused on social justice and racial justice, they go even further. They start to call for defunding the police. They call for reparations for slavery, and they even sort of turn on themselves. They denounce John Muir, familiar to your listeners, I'm sure, a California environmental pioneer, the guy who started the Sierra Club. They come after him. He's been dead for 100 years because of things he'd written in his diary about black people and Native Americans in the 1860s.
And you also talk about that there was a Sierra Club board president there who is black, and he's now a former Sierra Club board president who did not support this new direction. So what happened?
Well, there were a few people within the Sierra Club who said, look, we exist to be an environmental organization. We have a set of donors and a set of volunteers who came to us because that's what we do. It's wrong, and it's short-sighted to try to force those people who cared about one issue to suddenly align on a whole bunch of other issues, some of them which divide even the liberal movement. So why don't we just keep focused on the things that we're good at? And those people were not listened to. In the case of Aaron Mayer, the person you talked about, who had been their first black board president, he said, why are you attacking John Muir? First of all, you're getting the history wrong, but you're dividing this club unnecessarily. He writes an article defending John Muir in another publication, and they actually censure him for doing that. So there became this culture of, not only does everybody have to stay in line, but if you somehow get out of line, we're going to come after you.
Originally, going back to when they first decided to do this, was there the thought that, look, we need to attract younger, more diverse members because our membership was aging and too white, and that the environmental movement in general is seen by many as just overwhelmingly white and needs to be more diverse?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the really interesting features of this, is that they did this initially to try to be bigger, as you said, to be a bigger tent, to bring in people who didn't see themselves as sort of typical environmentalists into their cause. And there's a good argument they needed to do that because their organization, like a lot of organizations that relies on volunteers, was pretty old. They had a lot of old people. That's who has time to volunteer. So they were trying to diversify themselves and to grow themselves. But the way that they did it, the way in which they did it by saying everybody's got to be aligned on these topics. To be in the Sierra Club means you have to not just agree about the environment, but also agree about racism and social justice and reparations. It ended up making first their thinking narrower and then their group narrower because they were excluding people in the name of becoming more broad.
Okay, and so what do the members think, the members who are funding largely the Sierra Club?
We know that they actually asked their members, and in 2020, they asked their members, list your priorities. And when push came to shove, they rated climate change as their highest priority and racism as their last priority among a list of liberal policy topics. And more than half of them said they actually worried that the focus on social and racial justice would be counterproductive. Instead of making them bigger, it would make them smaller because it would drive away conservatives and detract from the focus that they had previously had on the environment. So despite that feedback they're getting from the members, they just keep pushing further and further ahead and further to the left.
And they have all sorts of things, like they have an equity language mandate, such as not to use the word vibrant as an adjective, which until I'd read your story, I didn't know that that was offensive. But anyway, so what about inside the organization, just amongst the employees? How are they receiving this?
There's a couple of ways in which they change themselves as part of this shift towards social justice. One is that they start paying their employees a lot more. They give everybody in 2018 a raise of about 30% across the board, which was great. It helped a lot of their staffers who'd been very low paid, but it also basically meant that they had to have their Trump bump in fundraising go on forever to pay for that. But then you're right, they started to change the culture. And first it was, you mentioned the language guide, it was sort of like a recommendation. Hey, don't use the word vibrant because that, echoes a racist trope. Don't say the word lame duck session, like a lame duck session of Congress, because lame is offensive. Don't say Americans, because some people you're talking to are not U.S. citizens. And it goes from that to then kind of a culture of investigation, where if you're not on board, suddenly you start being investigated by company lawyer, by Sierra Club lawyers. And they often don't even explain why you're under investigation. But many people took from it the idea that they were being investigated because they were not part of the same political program that the leadership wanted them to be part of.
Yeah. And then they sort of step into it more when they take a stand against Israel. Then they have to go back on that, right? Were they supporting the boycott, divest, sanction movement?
Yeah, basically the bets they had been making, trying to make the club this sort of social justice organization as well as an environmental group. After Trump leaves office in 2021, then they lose the sort of common enemy that was holding them all together. And then it becomes even riskier to try to take on these extra positions. But then they keep pushing forward. And as you said, the best example of that risk-taking was in 2022, the union of Sierra Club employees pushes the Sierra Club to stop running basically bird-watching, sightseeing trips in Israel. Does these trips all over the world, including in Israel. They say, stop doing them in Israel because we're going to protest the treatment of Palestinians. And the Sierra Club listens. They postpone the trips. And there's this huge backlash from donors, including Michael Bloomberg, who had been one of their biggest donors. And they lose members. And the Sierra Club reverses itself, goes back to running the trips in Israel. But that's one of the examples of them pushing this social justice thing so far that they go off a cliff and end up hurting, the core of their identity.
So people start canceling their memberships, and people like Michael Bloomberg withdraw their donations or don't donate anymore. And what happens to them financially?
Well, so as you mentioned, they got a lot smaller. From 4 million supporters in 2019, we got internal records showing they'd dropped down to 1.5 million this year. So they're 60% down from their peak. And their donations dropped from the peak during Trump's first term. But the expenses keep going up, in part because they're paying their own people more. They're investing a lot more in equity, trying to change the organization. And so then you end up with basically expenses outrun revenue. And so by the beginning of 2022, they're looking at a $40 to $60 million budget deficit. That's the gap between their projected spending and their projected revenue. And that's when all of these sort of trying to be all things to all people really becomes impossible.
And they hired Ben Jealous, who used to run the NAACP, to try to turn things around. But that doesn't work. Tell us that story.
So he inherits this very difficult situation, right? Somebody else has made all the promises, and now, he's the one who has to tell everybody that they can't keep them. They don't have enough money. So he starts laying off people to try to bring the budget back down to fit revenue. He says he's going to go out and raise more revenue to try to raise that floor. There's lots of complaints about a toxic atmosphere. There was one complaint about sexual harassment by him. There was complaints about bullying. He also just didn't win people over. He had a very difficult job, and it would have maybe taken a really skilled manager to pull that off, and that wasn't him. So by the beginning of this year, the union's threatening to strike. The union is basically going out in public saying Ben Jealous and the Sierra Club are bad progressives. They are harming, they're strike breakers. They're bad people. Don't donate to them. And at the same time, he's alienating the volunteers. So every part of the Sierra Club, which has been splitting apart because of all these social justice stances, now comes together again to oppose Ben Jealous.
Oh, my God. Okay, irony upon ironies. So the current leadership, when you present them with all of this, what is their response?
That's what really surprised me here. The response from them was, everything is fine. The guy who's the board president told us that he's very happy with where they are now. He can't think of anything over the last few years that he would regret or undo if he could. They're where he wants to be. So we gave him a lot of chances to say, we're going to change. We want to change. Here's how we're going to change. We wish we hadn't done this or that or this. Every time the response was, things are great. This is where we want to be.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess in a larger sense, this has been an issue that has also divided the Democrats in general. I don't know how many organizations have gone through such a similar implosion, as you put it. But this has certainly been a factor in the Democratic Party since Donald Trump's reelection. And, of course, you've got his quote-unquote anti-DEI initiatives, which perhaps might be in response to some of this in the culture that people were fed up with, things like being told not to say vibrant. But so I guess I'm wondering how much of an avatar this is in your mind, or if it's just a single story about a single organization.
Well, you're right. The reason we wanted to do this was because we felt like the Sierra Club was a really, public meltdown that illustrated something that goes across a lot of liberal nonprofits, and as you said, the Democratic Party itself. Groups like the Sierra Club that were strong and united and powerful during Trump's first term enter his second term weak and divided and disorganized, not because of anything he did, but because of things that they did to themselves, because of infighting and purity tests that they spent the last few years trying to enforce on themselves. So, in the moment of their greatest success back a few years ago, they made these decisions that sort of planted the seeds for this trouble. I mean, there's all kinds of examples in politics. Think about like the candidacy of Beto O'Rourke, right? Or the things that Joe Biden said or Kamala Harris said in 2019 and 2020. But the Sierra Club was a really good example of how powerfully those things came back to bite people this year.
So can it be turned around, this August environmental organization? I mean, when I was a kid, I used to get their calendars every year. They seemed so benign and such a nice organization. Do you think this can be turned around?
Yeah, I don't know that they'll be able to fix these problems. I don't hear from them a real strong sense of like, here's what we're going to change to solve the problems that we're in. But certainly they are solvable. And we've talked to so many people who love the Sierra Club, even people who are really embittered at the decisions that were made, the last few years, love the Sierra Club, love its mission, would like nothing more than to go back to that mission. We talked to this woman, Delia Malone. She was a volunteer in Colorado for the Sierra Club, and her issue was wolves. She wanted to reintroduce the wolves to the state of Colorado, and she succeeded. There are wolves in Colorado now. It's this huge success story for the Sierra Club. And she was reprimanded and then eventually investigated by the Sierra Club because in a meeting they had about what their legislative priorities were going to be for the Colorado State Legislature, she talked about wolves. And someone scolded her saying, Delia, what do wolves have to do with equity, justice, and inclusion? And so we talked to her, and she said, I was investigated, but I still love the place. I still want to volunteer for them. After our story came out, quoting her, they came after her and told her that now she could not speak to anyone outside the organization, not the media, not the audiences about wolves, nobody, because of her talking to us. She said, of all the things that have happened, this is the thing that'll make me leave.
Oh, wow. Well, David, thank you so much. Thanks for coming back on the show, and thanks for your reporting.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Well, what are your thoughts about being an anti-Semite? And they never, ever seem to deal with that term. You say what?
Well, according to compensatory logic, you first, like with all words, you find out what is an anti-Semite.
Conservatives are regrouping after a task force set up to fight anti-Semitism announced it was cutting ties with the influential conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. The foundation's president is facing criticism for defending Tucker Carlson after he hosted far-right influencer, white nationalist, and anti-Semite Nick Fuentes on his podcast. The Anti-Semitism Task Force met publicly Tuesday for the first time since the split happened about 2 weeks ago. NPR political correspondent Sarah McCammon was there, and she joins me now in studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so how did the Anti-Semitism Task Force find itself separating from Heritage?
Yeah, just to step back a little bit, Tucker Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes triggered a backlash from some prominent Republicans because Fuentes has this long history of extreme remarks. He's praised Hitler, proudly called himself a racist. It rose to another level after the Heritage Foundation president, Kevin Roberts, defended Carlson. As a result, the National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism announced it was cutting ties with Heritage.
Okay, so now they've reformed independently. What's next?
Well, they say the events of the past few weeks have broadened their focus as a group, and one of the task force co-chairs, Luke Moon, says they had been focused on what they describe as left-wing anti-Semitism.
The fight on the left is still happening. That is not done. That is a work that still has to go on. But we now have an emergent threat on the right.
And so, Leila, now the task force wants to push back forcefully against rhetoric from people like Fuentes.
Right, and he's an influential person. You were there. Who else was in the room?
Well, there were a lot of conservative Christian groups and some conservative-leaning Jewish leaders, and several prominent evangelical leaders were present, too. Plus, President Trump's ambassador to Israel, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, spoke to the group through a video message.
So in Genesis, when the scripture says God will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel, we don't argue with God about that.
So Huckabee tried to make the case for Israel from the Bible and told the group that Christians should have respect for Judaism because their faith comes from it.
What was he trying to accomplish with this messaging to this room?
Yeah, evangelical Christians, for the most part, ground their support for Israel in their interpretation of the Bible, and they have historically been the group most likely to support the Jewish state, even more than Jewish Americans in some polls. But other broadly pro-Israel groups warned that invoking religion only heightens tensions around the conflict in the Middle East. Jeremy Ben-Ami is president of J Street, which describes itself as a liberal pro-Israel Jewish group.
When any side, whether it is Muslims, Christians, or Jews, begin to introduce the idea that God somehow gave only one people a piece of land, you make it a conflict that can't be resolved.
But some of the Jewish leaders involved in this task force are willing to work with Christian groups who share their position on Israel.
Now, this is coming at a time when President Trump's supporters are divided on a number of issues. What does this debate over how to fight anti-Semitism mean for conservative activists going forward?
Well, a Heritage spokesperson pointed to a past statement from their president, Kevin Roberts, that called for fighting anti-Semitism across the political spectrum. The task force co-chair, Luke Moon, told me that he would not rule out the possibility of the group returning to Heritage one day, but he says this is a good time right after the off-year elections and well before the midterms for the conservative movement to be having this conversation.
That's NPR national political correspondent Sarah McCammon. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
We're going to pause this for the benefit of all y'all who never saw Soul Food. Soul Food is a movie about a big, humongous black grandmother, aptly named Big Mama. Big Mama demonstrates her love by feeding herself and her offspring enormous amounts of pig lard. Then, get this, Big Mama's arteries are so clogged, they gotta amputate her arm.
It was her leg.
Right, okay, whatever, leg. Then, she dies of a heart attack. Or another stroke, or something.
God called her home.
And what does the family do after she dies? They get together for a Sunday dinner and eat the same food that just killed Big Mama. The same food! They didn't learn a lesson. Nobody went on a diet, and that's the end of the movie.
For our next story, let me begin with a hard truth. A truth that should worry you more than any other headline tonight. The products you keep in your kitchen, the packets you buy from your grocery store, may not be real food. In fact, a lot of it may be closer to poison for you. Poison that big food companies are profiting from. Says who? One of the world's most respected medical journals. It's called The Lancet. It says we are eating ultra-processed food and too much of it, so much so that it's become a global health threat. And while consumers poison their bodies, food companies or food mafia are making massive profits. First things first, what is ultra-processed food? And why is it dangerous for you? Ultra-processed foods are foods that are not made in kitchens. They're made in factories. They start as cheap crops like maize, wheat, soy, palm oil. Companies break them down into powders, pastes, and syrups. They then mix additives, colors, flavors, sweeteners, preservatives. These additives change the taste, texture, and the look, and then they're sold to you as noodles, chips, biscuits, and packaged snacks. These are all ultra-processed foods. They're tasty, cheap, and addictive. And that is why they're everywhere. They fill supermarkets, they fill your kitchen, and they cause diseases. That list is long, by the way. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, depression, in some cases even early death. This is what ultra-processed food can do to you. Now, these findings come from a massive review of studies, and they reveal a trend. These foods are slowly displacing your traditional meals. They're making you overeat. And the trend is global. Take, for example, the US, the UK, and Australia. In these countries, more than half of all daily calories come from ultra-processed foods. And this is where the story becomes sinister. The rise of ultra-processed food is not accidental. It is engineered by the food mafia, a small group of companies that dominate the market. Names like Nestle, PepsiCo, Unilever, Coca-Cola have all been mentioned. These companies have made enormous profits from such products. Between 1962 and 2021, food corporations paid $2.9 trillion to their shareholders, $2.9 trillion. And more than half of that money came from ultra-processed food. Let me put that in simpler words. For over 6 decades, the most profitable products in the global food industry were not fresh foods, but ultra-processed foods, and that kind of money creates power. Power to influence markets, power to slow down any rule that threatens profits. And to keep that power, these companies follow a certain strategy. A playbook that we've seen before in the tobacco industry, or what they call big tobacco. They market aggressively. They target children, they flood media with advertising, they hire influencers to normalize their products, and they sponsor research that creates confusion so that you doubt your choices. This is how scientific doubt is manufactured. This is how regulation is delayed, and when regulation is delayed, the profits keep rising and the health costs keep growing. Now, in its defense, the industry says that there is, and I'm quoting, there is no scientific consensus on ultra-processed foods. But the Lancet research makes one thing quite clear: the world cannot wait for perfect proof. It must act today. And this should be a signal for governments more than anyone else. They should regulate the space better, with clear warning labels, limits on marketing, and taxes on certain products. They must also ensure better access to fresh and minimally processed food. This has to be a policy move. So here's the question for all of us. Will governments put public health first, or will the food companies keep deciding what the world eats? Because right now, the choice is not on your plate. It's in their boardrooms. Our next story is about Nestle. It is the world's largest food company. It makes some of the most well-known products in the world. But tonight it is facing serious questions, and that is because of a new investigation. A report says Nestle sold baby cereals with added sugar. These products were sold in parts of Africa. They were meant for babies as young as 6 months. The lab tests found added sugar in most tested packets. But here's the thing. The same product in Europe had no added sugar. So 2 different standards for 2 different worlds. Nestle says the report is misleading and scientifically inaccurate. But the investigation has now triggered a global debate. Are food companies following one rule for some regions and another for others? Here's a report.
Early solid foods for babies are supposed to be the safest. They are generally considered free from additives. But a recent investigation has raised an alarm. Some packaged baby cereals in Africa contain added sugar, sugar that many parents may not be aware of. The findings were released by Public Eye. It is a Swiss investigative group, and their investigation was centered on the world's largest food company, Nestlé. Public Eye's team worked with civil society partners in reportedly over 20 African countries. Together, they collected nearly 100 samples of Cerelac. Cerelac is Nestlé's flagship cereal for babies aged 6 months and above. all the samples went to a laboratory for testing. The results were consistent. More than 90% of the packets contained added sugar. The average serving held around 6 grams. That is roughly 1½ teaspoons. Some packets even contained 7½ grams. Investigators then compared these results with Cerelac, sold in richer markets. Many European versions had no added sugar. Public eye pointed to this contrast. They said this amounted to a double standard, and that comparison triggered a bigger debate. Because global health guidance is clear. The World Health Organization recommends no added sugars in foods for children under 3. Experts say early sugar exposure can shape taste preferences. They also link it to tooth decay and higher risks of obesity later in life. Nestlé, however, rejected the allegations. The company said the report was misleading. It said its products follow national regulations in every country, and that its recipes meet international standards. Nestlé also said some of the sugar detected in tests comes from natural ingredients, including grains, milk, and fruit, and it announced a global shift to no added sugar Cerelac by the end of this year. But this is not the first time Nestlé has faced scrutiny over its nutrition practices. In April 2024, Public Eye reported that Nestlé added sugar to its baby foods sold in low-income countries, including India. But they were not included in the European markets. In 2015, Nestlé's favorite Maggi noodles were banned in India. This was after it was found that the product contained more than permissible levels of lead and monosodium glutamate, or MSG. And over the years, rights groups have also reported cases of child labor on cocoa farms allegedly linked to Nestlé. Those reports led to lawsuits and promises to strengthen supply chain checks. Together, these episodes form a long history of scrutiny, and they shape how the new findings are received today. The latest results land at a critical moment for many African countries. Obesity and diabetes are rising. Undernutrition remains widespread. Health experts call this the double burden of malnutrition. And this raises some important questions. What should be the standard for food made for infants? And should that standard ever differ from one region to another?
Stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, we're getting ready to be put in a real trap with this legalization of marijuana. So everybody, every black person can be unemployed, and then they can sit in their corner and get high on marijuana with whatever they decide to put in it. And people won't be asking for jobs and being determined that they're going to get jobs and going to get an education. No, everybody can start getting high on marijuana because somebody said it's medicinal and it's legal.
What about,
so we better beware.
What about the people who say the legalization of marijuana is fighting against racism because you have so many black people who are unjustly incarcerated as a result of racist enforcement of these drug laws? So this would be a good thing, and it would keep black people out of greater confinement.
No, we can do it by stop using and selling drugs to one another. See, if I'm not using drugs, then I can't be incarcerated for drugs. And I see so many males, young males in my practice who would become psychotic, almost never to return to normal from marijuana use because you don't know what's in it.
Stomach pain and severe or prolonged vomiting. University of Washington School of Medicine doctors say those are some of the issues chronic cannabis users are complaining about as they show up to the emergency room. Como Stella Sun live this evening outside UW Medicine in South Lake Union with the new details about this increasing trend doctors are seeing. Stella?
Preston, doctors say for years some cannabis users, chronic cannabis users, have been coming into the ER with stomach pain as well as severe and prolonged vomiting. But thanks to some updates by the World Health Organization, doctors can now diagnose these patients with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. In emergency rooms across the state,
it seems like we see a lot of people coming in with this nausea and this vomiting. It's really hard to treat, and a lot of belly pain.
The UW School of Medicine says over the last decade, ER doctors have been treating more patients experiencing these problems.
As you start talking to people a little bit more, you find out that they use cannabis pretty regularly, and suddenly it all kind of makes sense.
Until recently, there was not an official name for what these chronic cannabis users were dealing with.
Cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. So emesis is throwing up, and hyper means throwing up a lot.
The World Health Organization updating its classification of diseases manual. Doctors can now diagnose cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, helping addiction researchers collect data and evidence on the impacts of chronic cannabis use.
Now that we have a name, we can better educate the society to understand that cannabis, yes, helps to control nausea in some people. It's very helpful for some people, but the other side is the opposite. They also can provoke very painful cyclic vomits with a lot of stress.
As concrete numbers get collected on cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, a potential treatment for chronic cannabis users.
Does a hot shower help? And they're like, yeah. And this is the only thing I know of that is really treated with a hot shower.
Now, UW Medicine says despite an uptick in these cases, in these hospital cases, a lot of clinicians aren't too familiar with this, and that's because it's fairly new. They say that naming it will help these doctors better diagnose their sick patients. We're live here in South Lake Union. Salsa KOMO News.
As your body grows bigger, your mind must flower. It's great to learn, 'cause knowledge is power. It's Schoolhouse Rockin', a chip off the block on your favorite Schoolhouse, Schoolhouse.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly being integrated into many facets of life, including in America's classrooms. As more school districts integrate AI into learning, Stephanie Tsai looks at its growing impact in K-12 education and the warning signs around its use.
Now, parents and teachers are still trying to get a handle on students' use of social media, and now they're being forced to grapple with AI, too. A recent survey from the RAND Corporation found more than half of U.S. students are using AI for school, an increase of 15 percentage points this year compared to just 2 years ago. At the same time, 61% of parents believe AI will harm students' critical thinking, compared to just 22% of school district leaders. All of this as AI juggernaut OpenAI gets even more embedded into the business of American education. Today, it announced a new partnership with school districts across the country. The company says it is giving roughly 400,000 K-12 educators free access to a version of ChatGPT through the next academic year. Let's start by hearing from some parents and teachers grappling with the onset of AI in schools.
Hi, my name is Elsie Carter. My daughter is in the 9th grade, and she's 14 years old. I use AI every single day. Of course, I know that they're using AI as well. But she has expressed that she uses it to mostly just kind of help guide her in her writing assignments to make sure that her argument is present, that it's cogent.
I'm Crystal Jean, and I'm a teacher. Being in this profession for as long as I have, change is always there. And AI is just another change. It's not going anywhere.
I'm Sarah, and I have a child in 12th grade. The superintendent of Houston Independent School District, where my child goes, is a big fan of AI, and it's taking the place of teachers' ability to write curriculum and, experts' ability to write curriculum.
I'm Matt Walton. I am a technology and engineering education teacher in Henrico County, which is located just outside of Richmond, Virginia. To be honest, I think we're, as a society in America, we're kind of behind the eight ball a little bit when it comes to artificial intelligence and teaching it to our high school students.
My name is Chris Hamatake. I have 3 kids in K-12 schools. I've got a 4th grader, a 9th grader, and an 11th grader. If my kids are going to use AI, I want them to know kind of questions to ask to figure out, is this an accurate response from AI? Can I trust this? And how do I prove that it's accurate or not?
There have been times when students have tried to pass off an AI generation as their work. And when it's been flagged, and I've tried to have a conversation with the student, rarely have they been able to put thought into their, into their verbalization.
I'm an AP computer science teacher, and there's a unit on artificial intelligence in there. We do talk about the language models out there, such as ChatGPT and Gemini and Microsoft Copilot. But I also ask my students to investigate artificial intelligence that goes beyond the classroom walls. For example, how's the AI going to be used in healthcare?
It is going to change our ability to critically think about things. But it's also the future. Like it's here to stay. It's being integrated into every electronic device, and software that you can imagine. So I think that we have to embrace it. And we just got to be careful, because I do think that critical thinking part of it is altering our ability to think for ourselves.
Who's Reading is a reading log platform that I've been dabbling with and having the students use, and the writing prompts are like AI generated, where you can keep track of the minutes that you read, and so it's very personalized. And then you can lower the reading level. You can put the grade level of the student if they're 7th grade, but their reading level is, say, 3rd grade.
I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's an aid to students, it helps them, but if you're using AI to help you organize your paper, or to help you come up with ideas, or to help you strategize for your paper, you're not learning how to do that yourself.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that being introduced into the classroom setting, as long as teachers are able to take the role of the supervisor, the fact checker with it. And that's can be hard, because we ask a lot of our teachers anyway. And I don't know if they have the bandwidth for that.
I'm joined now by Justin Reich, the director of the Teaching Systems Lab at MIT. He's also the author of Failure to Disrupt: Why Technology Alone Can't Transform Education. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. You heard the anxiety, the opportunities, the uncertainty associated with this technology. Your research has really been focusing on this, in particular with K through 12 education. How prevalent is this technology right now in schools, and what are the disruptions we're seeing from it, for better or worse at this point?
Well, as you said at the top of your piece, I was co-author on that RAND paper, which showed that about half of teachers and about half of students most recently reported using AI, and that number continues to grow. It's much higher in secondary school, middle and high school, than it is in elementary school. The enormous concern that educators have is that when students are using AI to do their work, they're not thinking, they're not struggling, and they're not learning. Some of that looks like cheating. Some of that is a very sort of classic case of a student taking work from somewhere else and representing it as their own. But in other cases, it's more subtle problems where students are using machines to produce work, and they're not doing the thinking and struggle that they need to do, as many of your guests articulated, in order to be able to learn. Teachers and students are also excited about the fact that these tools are for sure going to empower human beings to do all kinds of new things. And so we want to find ways of navigating the opportunities they present, also with some real immediate concerns that teachers in particular, I think, feel quite earnestly.
Now, and you have OpenAI now freely giving it to thousands of teachers, saying ChatGPT will enable teachers to be better at their jobs. We spoke to the superintendent, Justin, of a large, diverse school district in Virginia who is part of this new initiative. Here's what she said.
It's a very diverse system with diverse needs. What that means is heavier demand placed on our teachers, because our educators are the ones that have to differentiate lessons, look at data across multiple content areas for multiple students, and that can be a heavy tax on time. So when I think about what's possible with OpenAI, with ChatGPT for teachers, it really can go a long way in helping supplement what our teachers are doing in the classroom every day, removing some of the barriers of time and the burden of time for teachers to do some of the manual, more administrative things that actually ChatGPT for teachers could do for them.
Justin, that all sounds pretty great. I mean, you're a former high school teacher yourself. How do you see that balance between the promise that AI will supplement what teachers do, increase their bandwidth, versus replace what they do, and maybe even suck up more of their bandwidth?
There were technologists in the middle of the 20th century that made a very similar argument when they invented a machine called the Scantron machine, which was the first machine that was able to automatically score multiple choice items. And they made a very similar kind of argument that this is going to save teachers tons of time, that there's going to be all kinds of new assessment possibilities. Teachers are going to be able to focus on the most important things. And I think most teachers looking back on the Scantron machine would not say, wow, multiple choice items have saved us so much time. So sometimes when we aim for efficiency, we don't necessarily get efficiency. We actually get a system that is targeted at something different. So I think we should be very cautious about that risk. There are more contemporary examples too. Probably the most important thing is if we are saving teachers time, that only matters if the learning afterwards is actually better. So if teachers are using ChatGPT to make new materials, but those new materials don't help students learn as well as the materials that teachers were creating, then if we're saving time at the cost of learning, that's not an advantage.
I want to follow up. Prince William County, where that superintendent we interviewed is from, is one of those school districts that has a high number of disadvantaged students and English as a second language learners. That brings up one of the chronic problems that AI presumably might solve, which is how to make sure students aren't left behind. How do you see generative AI's potential for helping or harming equity in American education?
So again, the argument that new technologies will disproportionately benefit students furthest from opportunity is now over a century old. When radio was first introduced, it was argued that with radio, the underprivileged school would become the privileged one, that elite lectures could be broadcast into the homes of lower income students, and radio did not bring equality. Personal computers did not bring equality. The web didn't bring equality. New technologies typically disproportionately benefit the affluent. They benefit people with the financial, social, and technical capital to take advantage of new innovations. So it is certainly admirable to try to use these new technologies to close equity gaps, but over and over again, what we see with many generations of new technologies in education systems is that they really more accelerate opportunities for the affluent than they create opportunities for low-income students. What makes more equitable educational environments are social movements that provide more resources to families, to students, to teachers, to schools, so that they can do a better job and have more resources to educate young people furthest from opportunity.
Finally, Justin, how much are educators handing over to tech companies when they adopt these technologies, and what kind of policies should be put in place as ed tech gains such wide purchase in the American education landscape?
Well, I think school district leaders should constantly remember that for organizations like OpenAI, giving away ChatGPT is a customer acquisition strategy. These companies are trying to build brand affinity and make students customers for life. And our public school systems should be very careful about how we invite any kind of company into what we take as a public good and as a good that students can't refuse. I think there are some districts that are exploring questions like, should students and families be able to refuse? Be able to say, actually, I don't want my students introduced to those tools, and how would they logistically work with that, and how would that work? Probably the other thing that school districts really need to keep in mind is that this free technology they're getting is venture capital subsidized technology. This is like the Uber rides you used to get for $8 across town. One day the investors will want their money back. And when that day comes, we may find that the consumer experience of these tools gets much, much worse, that either they become more expensive or they have more advertisements, more sponsored content, all kinds of things that maybe we really don't want happening inside of our schools. So school district leaders making these big purchases or these big acceptances of free resources from schools really need to think carefully, not only about the decisions they're making now, but what they may be locking themselves into for the future.
Just so much to talk about when it comes to this topic, and we'll continue to explore a lot of these AI issues down the line. For now, we'll have to leave it there. Justin Reich, director of the Teaching Systems Lab at MIT, thank you for joining us.
It's been a great pleasure.
Medical apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
Judy, Rob, Mercedes Wells says she knew something was wrong when she went to the hospital to give birth, and they did not put her in a labor and delivery room. Instead, she says she spent 6 hours there until her contractions were just 1 minute apart when the nurse told her to go home. 8 minutes after being forced to leave, she says she gave birth in her car. Meet 3-day-old Elena Wells. The adorable little girl is doing well, according to her mother, but Mercedes Wells says she is still deeply disturbed. She had to give birth on the side of the road early Sunday morning after being forced to leave Franciscan Health in Crown Point, Indiana, just 8 minutes earlier. 38-year-old Mercedes Wells is an experienced mother who just gave birth to her 4th child Sunday morning. She says she was in a lot of pain and knew the baby was coming soon, but she says the nurse told her to leave.
I was in excruciating pain. She seen me in pain and agony, and I guess she still perceives me to not be in labor.
Wells' mother took this video as she was being wheeled out of the hospital, accompanied by security. Wells, who lives in Chicago, says she was visiting Indiana 2 weeks before her due date when she felt like it was time. They chose the closest hospital, but when they made her leave, her husband, Leon, was driving them to the next closest hospital in Munster when the baby started to emerge.
It's totally God's grace. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I don't have any medical license or anything to deliver a baby.
Fortunately, things worked out and baby Elena arrived safely. But the couple and their attorney say this is not the way it is supposed to happen.
Can we agree that a woman in active labor should not be sent away without first being seen by a doctor?
The CEO of Franciscan Health says in a statement, patient privacy laws prevent them from commenting extensively, but he says, quote, the video and the comments it has generated are deeply troubling, and we understand the concern this has raised. The video is just one part of the information we are reviewing as part of a thorough investigation into this alleged incident. For her part, Mercedes says this experience has hurt her deeply.
I was stripped of my dignity. I was stripped of my dignity as a person because I was treated less than an animal.
Mercedes and Leon Wells say at this point they're not considering legal action, but through their attorney they say they would like a meeting with the hospital administrators to help ensure that this never happens again to another family.
Oh, we're glad the baby is okay after all
this. John, thank you.
The man knot. Race, class, genre, and the dilemmas of black manhood.
Live at 5, a man charged with murder is still not in jail, even after facing a judge for the first time. Thank you for joining us for Live at 5. I'm Lauren Magarino.
And I'm Brad Stevens. That man is 32-year-old Richard Fatherly, a detention officer at the Wyandotte County Jail. Fatherly is charged in the death of Charles Adair, who died inside the jail in July. Court documents accuse Fatherly of kneeling on Adair's back for more than a minute. Adair became unresponsive. The state coroner ruled his death a homicide.
Fatherly did not enter a plea today. He's still not been booked into jail or had a mugshot taken. KCTV5 requested to have a camera in the courtroom. A judge denied that request.
But we were invited to watch the proceedings with the Adair family. KCTV5 investigative reporter Samantha Boring joins us now live at 5 from the Wyandotte County Courthouse. Samantha, you were there with the family while this was happening. What is their response tonight?
Well, Brad, Lauren, leading up to this, the family of Charles Adair tells me they were confused. Why couldn't they just be here at the courthouse for that first hearing? Now, the hearing lasted just under 2 minutes, leaving the family not even more confused, but also frustrated.
It's like a smack in the face.
Tuesday, the family of Charles Adair gathering at Markham Harvey Funeral Home.
I felt that was really disrespectful. I just never heard of a murder case being a Zoom.
watching the first appearance of Richard Fatherly accused of killing their brother. It was all via Zoom.
We should have been able to be there in that courtroom. Fatherly should have to face family members of the person that he killed.
The family feels they should be considered more in this case. They still want to see Fatherly behind bars.
It was every bit of 2 to 3 minutes. He's sitting there in the comfort of his lawyer's office, going home, sleeping in his own bed.
Fatherly's hearing was moved to Zoom last week. KCTV5 Investigates reached out to the Wyandotte County District Court to find out why. They shared in a statement saying, quote, "The hearing was held by Zoom for scheduling purposes." So how can this be allowed? UMKC law professor Steve Lieben is unrelated to the case, but served as a Kansas judge for 27 years. He says remote hearings are allowed by state statute and a recent Supreme Court ruling.
So while it's not normal in a murder case, it's also not completely out of the ordinary.
After the short hearing, a new court date was set. Then there's the question, will Fatherly ever be behind bars? Professor Lieben says the court determined Fatherly was not a flight risk or a risk to the community.
And so unless something changes with one of those two factors, I would not anticipate any change in his status.
It's a decision Adair's family says leaves them with even more heartbreak.
And we miss him, we miss everything about him.
Lieben says the defendant, Fatherly, is presumed innocent until convicted or not. Fatherly's next court appearance is December 19th at 1 p.m. The court system currently shows that will be in person, but that could always change. Live in Wyandotte County, Samantha Boring, KCTV5 Investigates.
Samantha, thank you. And we will keep following this story closely for you. Download the KCTV5 app to your phone so you can stay on top of any breaking developments and get more reaction to the case.
I've always said, listen, college football is king of the world.
Louisiana State Police have come under scrutiny for charging a former college football star with negligent homicide after new video evidence suggests he may not have been involved. Mel Bridges with WRKF in Baton Rouge reports the case is raising questions about how state police conduct investigations.
Louisiana State University football is known for producing NFL-caliber players. Wide receiver Kyron Lacey was one of those. The young black athlete was coming off a huge season in 2024 and was widely seen as a top 50 pick in the NFL draft. And then, on December 17th, 2024, everything changed.
In that breaking news, LSU football star Kyron Lacey out on bail tonight after surrendering to police on charges connected to a deadly crash.
That was Baton Rouge TV station WAFB reporting on a fatal car crash that Lacey was allegedly involved in. Surveillance video shows Lacey driving south in a green Dodge Charger, passing 4 cars at high speeds on a 2-lane road. Then a pickup truck driving northbound suddenly swerved off the road to avoid something, allegedly Lacey, causing a chain reaction involving 2 more cars behind the pickup that led to the death of a 78-year-old veteran. Here's a video from Louisiana State Police explaining their reasonings for charging Lacey.
All evidence collected supports the conclusion that Lacey's reckless operation of the green Charger in oncoming traffic triggered the chain of events involving the other drivers, ultimately resulting in the fatal crash.
Lacey drove away from the accident. State police charged Lacey with negligent homicide, reckless operation of the vehicle, and felony hit and run. Lacey turned himself in, then posted bail. The NFL rescinded his draft invitation. On April 12, 2025, 2 days before his case was scheduled to go before a grand jury, Kyron Lacey died by suicide of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It happened after he was chased by police in Houston, who were responding to a call about a gun being fired into the ground during an argument between Lacey and a family member. Here's then LSU head football coach Brian Kelly speaking at a press conference the day of Lacey's death.
I'll remember him as somebody that had a love for the game, a love for being a Tiger, and was a guy that played with great emotion.
And for a while, that was the end of it. But in October, new evidence surfaced in the original car crash that seemed to exonerate Lacey. Here's Lacey's lawyer, Matthew Orey, on HTV Homa, a local TV station, presenting surveillance video that he says proves Lacey is innocent because he was back in the southbound lane when the crash happened.
At the time of impact, he's 72.6 yards behind the vehicles at the time of impact. Keyword, behind the vehicles. That is not how this story was ever painted. Never.
Or alleged state police exaggerated or even fabricated evidence to charge Laci. After the videos surfaced, online reaction was swift. Much of it was directed at state police, with people saying Laci wouldn't have killed himself if he hadn't been charged and lost his NFL draft invitation. But soon after, state police issued a narrated video defending their investigation. It shows another view of the accident and says Laci traveled over the speed limit and that Laci didn't get back into his correct lane until it was too late.
As a green Dodge Charger returns to the southbound lane, aggressive braking and engine deceleration are immediately followed by a crash that can be heard on the surveillance footage.
In the video, state police reiterated that nowhere in their investigation did they say Laci directly caused the crash. The Louisiana NAACP called for the resignation of the head of state police, saying the agency failed the public and that their narrated video is an attempt to justify their role in implicating Laci, including his death by suicide. They demanded accountability. And the Democratic Party of Louisiana is now calling for a new law against fabricating evidence. They call it Laci Law. Darius Lannis heads the Louisiana Democratic Party.
Our heart always goes out to the Laci family. You know, this is not about politics, but it is about righting wrongs. It is about fixing situations so that people inside of our state know that we're fighting on their behalf at all times.
Louisiana's Republican Attorney General said in a statement that the new evidence Laci's lawyer put forth does not absolve him in responsibility in the accident. However, she says she is reviewing how the state police conducted its investigation and will release her findings, but it's not clear when. For NPR News, I'm Mel Bridges in Baton Rouge.
If you or someone you know may be considering suicide or is in crisis, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Upset alert was out in Aggie land. Number 3 Texas A&M hosting the South Carolina Gamecocks. Final minutes in the second quarter. Lenore Sellers finding Nyck Harbor. This is a track star, and you see it. You can see it just in his move. As soon as he opened up that stride line, it was over with. South Carolina up 30-3 at the break. Also during that game in College Station, there was an exchange between a Texas trooper and Nyck Harbor as Harbor returned from the tunnel following his touchdown in the second quarter. Trooper bumped shoulders, then pointed demonstratively at the South Carolina receiver. Now, the Texas Department of Public Safety tweeted the following during the game on social media. The Texas Department of Public Safety is aware of the incident that occurred today during the Texas A&M football game. The DPS trooper involved was sent home from the game. Our Office of Inspector General is also aware of the incident and will be further looking into the matter.
Harbor's got great speed. The track star is free.
And I said, well, it's time to cave again this year. So, but no, they pulled it out.
Saturday's Texas A&M versus South Carolina game had many Aggie fans like third-generation Aggie Craig Graves energized after a 27-point comeback win.
I think that they've learned how to go and adjust now during the halftime, which they never could do that before. So that's great.
But Saturday's big win comes with a sour aftertaste.
That guy should never step foot on Kyle Field again, in my opinion.
During the game, following a long touchdown scored by South Carolina wide receiver Nyck Harbor, he and his teammates appear to get into a confrontation with a Texas Department of Public Safety trooper who walks between Harbor and teammate Oscar Hadaway III.
When I initially saw it, I mean, of course, it wasn't in slow motion and all that, and so I was just like, why did he come into contact with those guys?
During that moment captured on video by ESPN, the trooper appears to elbow his way through the players as he walks in between them. He then says something to Harbor, who then turns around and apparently says something to the trooper.
And just literally tries to bulldoze both of these kids. And I was like, my God, what are you doing?
The moment captured the attention of many prominent athletes like NBA star LeBron James, who called for the trooper to be suspended. According to Texas A&M police, the trooper was removed from the game after the interaction. We reached out to Texas DPS to request body cam video of the incident and to see if there had been any other disciplinary action against the trooper. They responded simply that our requests had been received by the Media and Communications Office.
That's not reflective of law enforcement that I know of. As DPS.
After Saturday's game, South Carolina head football coach Shane Beamer was asked about the trooper being removed.
First-class people, so I appreciate them handling that the right way and sending him home.
You said that if, these players at South Carolina, if someone on that team wanted to, they could pursue legal charges against this officer.
That is, in my opinion, that's a Class C assault. I mean, that's just a bully with a badge.
Deep in the heart. What'd you say now? I said deep in the heart. I can't hear you. Deep in the heart. Where's that?
A lawyer for one of two North Texas men arrested for allegedly plotting a murderous coup on a Caribbean island is now telling everybody to, quote, hold their horses. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Eager. Federal officials announced the indictments for Gavin Wiesenberg and Tanner Thomas. Investigators allege the men were looking to recruit a small army, take a sailboat to an island just a few miles off the coast of Haiti, kill all the men on the island, and enslave the women and children. Fox 4's Alex Boyer has more on this bizarre story. Alex.
Yeah, guys, to put things in perspective, a criminologist I spoke to for this story tells me that this is the most bizarre case he has ever reviewed in his 29 years in law enforcement. Now, those two North Texas suspects remain in jail. And again, as you mentioned, they're accused of plotting a coup some 1,700 miles away. These are the North Texas men federal prosecutors say were planning to travel to an island in Haiti to kill the men and turn the women into sex slaves. Dr. Alex Del Carmen calls it the most bizarre case he's seen in his entire career.
Well, you know, this is a very unusual case, right?
According to a federal indictment, 21-year-old Gavin Wiesenberg from Allen and 20-year-old Tanner Thomas from Argyle had been plotting to invade Gonave Island with a population of 87,000, which is part of Haiti. Prosecutors say Wiesenberg and Thomas planned to invade the island by sailboat, heavily armed, using homeless people they would enlist from Washington, D.C. to murder the men on the island, take control of the territory, and then turn the women into sex slaves. Prosecutors say Thomas prepared for the attack by enlisting in the Air Force for military training, and Wiesenberg enrolled in a fire training academy but later flunked out. Both men are accused of manufacturing child pornography by manipulating and exploiting a juvenile. I talked to Del Carmen about the wild and highly implausible scheme.
I think it's more than just talk, right? So typically what federal prosecutors will do is they're going to look at what sort of planification, took place. And whether or not there was an intent, and in addition to the intent, whether these individuals had the capability of doing this. And all of these elements of the crime are present in this particular case.
But in a statement to Fox 4 News, the attorney for Gavin Wiesenberg said, I encourage everyone to hold their horses and stay tuned. An indictment is simply an allegation. And while there is some truth to the allegations, I believe that it will become clear what actually did not, and could not have happened. If your initial response to the government's press release was, that sounds crazy, impossible, and absurd, you might be onto something.
I've seen a lot, but I've never seen anything like this before on U.S. soil.
And we also heard back from Tanner Thomas's attorney via email this afternoon, and he said that he will be defending this case vigorously, and also added that his client will be entering a plea of not guilty on Monday. Back to you.
All right, Alex Boyer live tonight. Thank you.
So, these events that keep coming up, instead of just reacting, dealing with them one at a time and being shocked each time we have another event that surfaces that is brought to our attention, we need to function from the position of an analysis that clarifies we are in a total system structure of racism, white supremacy, and that is why we are seeing the kinds of behaviors from individuals, be it Donald Sterling or be it George Zimmerman or any of the other cases that come to our attention. There is a reason that these cases exist. And I want to also talk about, in this case, they talked about mental health, but also gun control. And we have to begin to understand, I say you can't understand the gun mania if you don't understand racism, white supremacy. The gun is the answer to conscious and or subconscious, the answer, the response to the white collective feeling they can be genetically annihilated by black genetic material. And the gun is a great equalizer. I encourage everybody to get a copy of the ISIS papers and read.
Breaking news out of Indiana, where a house cleaner was shot and killed after showing up at the wrong house. Let's go to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, who's been following this case from the CBS newsroom. Chanel, what are the updates on the case today?
Well, Liz, a big update coming from the county prosecutor of this case today. In Indiana, they have now charged the Indiana homeowner, 62-year-old Curt Anderson. He's been booked and charged with voluntary manslaughter. He is now being held without bail. The prosecutor in this case, Liz, Kent Eastwood, today during that press conference this afternoon, acknowledged that Indiana does have some pretty strong protections for self-defense, but also made it a point of mentioning that in his view, those protections don't actually apply here. Listen.
It is vitally important for the citizens of Boone County to understand that our decision today in no way should be interpreted as a challenge to Indiana stand your ground law or a person's right to self-defense. We respect those laws, believe in those laws, and will uphold those laws. Based upon the particular evidence and circumstances of this case, we have determined that Curt Anderson's actions do not fall within the legal protections provided by the Indiana Stand Your Ground law. This case is not about undermining the law. It's about applying the law to the facts of this case, and that is what we intend to prove at trial.
Now, Liz, just to remind you what had happened here, this fatal shooting happened on November 5th in an Indiana suburb. Police say that this husband and wife who worked as house cleaners accidentally showed up to the wrong address. They didn't go into the home. They were standing outside of the home, and that's when shots began to be fired from inside the house. The woman in this case, Maria Florinda Rios Perez, she was killed. By the time police arrived, she had already passed away. This is somebody who was a 32-year-old Guatemalan immigrant, a mother of 4. And families, Liz, say that she died in her husband's arms after she was fatally shot in the head. Now, today, prosecutors are saying this kind of case is very rare. They also made it a point to say that Anderson has no affiliation with any local police department. This afternoon, we're also getting reaction from Anderson's attorney responding to this news of this voluntary manslaughter charge on social media. I want to show you that statement. Part of it here says, quote, "I look forward to proving in court that his actions were fully justified by the Castle Doctrine provision of Indiana's self-defense law." Remember, I told you about that off the top. That law, he says, allows a person to use reasonable force, including deadly force, if he reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent an unlawful entry into his home. So the big question here in this case that jurors will have to ask themselves, Liz, is was this lethal force necessary in this case? We know that the initial hearing is scheduled for this Friday.
Such a heartbreaking story, Chanel, especially the very gruesome details there. All right, Chanel Call, thank you so much for that.
Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty by Dorothy Roberts.
Now, breaking news from NBC4.
A not guilty verdict in the murder trial of a Central Ohio police officer. Connor Grubb was acquitted of 6 charges stemming from the deadly shooting of a pregnant woman. This is video from the courtroom. Family of Takaya Young with emotional outbursts after the 12-person jury's verdict, saying the shooting that led to her death and the death of her unborn baby was justified. Grubb, a Blendon Township police officer, was alerted that Young may have been stealing alcohol, and she did not follow commands from police to get out of her car. Counts for felonious assault, murder, and involuntary manslaughter. All not guilty.
We heard from prosecutors in this case just a couple of minutes after the verdict was read here at the Franklin County Courthouse, and they say the jury was able to hear all of the evidence in this case. Obviously, it didn't go the state's way here. They did tell us that Takaya Young's family deserved to have all of the evidence shown here. They were able to hear everything, and the jury, they have to respect the decision that they made here. The prosecutors were from Montgomery County. They were just visiting for this case. They say they did everything they can do. Unfortunately, it just didn't go their way. Hear from them here.
And the family members of Takaya Young and her unborn child deserved to have a jury hear the evidence in this case and make a determination as to whether or not the defendant, the officer in this case, his use of deadly force was justified or was it not. And their verdict today spoke to that. They've made their decision.
There was a wave of emotion that came over the courtroom the second that verdict was read. Grubb's family broke out in tears. You saw Young's family also erupt in tears. I even saw several jurors who were crying as the judge read that verdict. The jury deliberated for just under 7 hours. And as you said, we just spoke with Grubb's defense attorneys, Mark Collins and Caitlin Stevens. They said that they wanted to thank the jurors on behalf of Grubb and his family for doing an impossible task. As I said, you could see the pain that was on their faces as he read this. And now, no matter what, Grubb has to live with the fact that he took a life, 2 lives on duty that day, moving on for the rest of his life. The defense attorneys say that this brings up bigger changes within the legal system. They're calling for change within the grand jury system and also what it means when indicting a police officer. Take a listen to what they had to say.
They wanted us to express their thanks to the community, to the support that they've gotten, and they understand the other side. They understand the frustration, the sorrow, and the pain that Miss Young's family feels, and it's real.
Now, I'm so glad that I found Jim Jones in time. I'm so glad I found Jim Jones in time. I'm so glad that I found Jim Jones in time. Oh my God, what shall I do? I'm so glad trouble don't last always.
On November 18, 1978, after investigating reports followers of Jim Jones were being mistreated, California Congressman Leo Ryan tried to leave a settlement in Jonestown. Many of the followers wanted to leave with Ryan. Armed men opened fire on the planes, killing Ryan and several others. Meanwhile, at the compound, Jones ordered everyone else to drink poison. A total of 918 people died, including more than 200 children.
Context of White Supremacy. People's Temple. This time last year, I was still in California. Greatest research trip ever. The Worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T., in for another broadcast of the Context of White Supremacy. Hopefully to share constructive information for non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what the global system of white supremacy racism is and how it works. White people do not need to listen to the cows. Today's date, JFK Day. Abraham Bolden still with us. Saturday, November 22, 2025. So I have been told. Our weekly compensatory call-in. Dial in if you have thoughts, observations, suggestions to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. That number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The People's Temple. November 18, 1978 is the date of the massacre in Guyana, South America. The official report, I think they took the number down from 918 to like 911, 910, if that means anything, whatever. But they adjusted that number to a smidge over 900 deaths. And so then November 27, in the middle of the coming week, assassination of Leo Ryan and the city manager, Harvey Milk, in San Francisco. They were talking while I was in Milwaukee earlier this year, Sade C. Robinson. They were talking about removing Harvey Milk's name from some of the government institutions, buildings, and such. And that's Jim Jones. Matter of fact, I heard this on the radio. We were riding to court. Maxwell Anderson, convicted racist, convicted race soldier, convicted murderer. When I was riding this trial, and that popped on the radio, and I said, People's Temple, People's Temple. Anyway, but we had a caller who asked me recently whether or not I thought the book that we were reading about Assata Shakur, was it good, in quotes. I said, generally, the way I evaluate the constructive value of a book is, does it help me better understand racism, white supremacy? Does it help me better understand white people? Is there constructive information that I can use and apply to my thought, speech, conduct, that hopefully moving us closer to replacing white supremacy with justice? Is that present in the book? I would look for examples, things like Harriet A. Washington, A Terrible Thing to Waste. That book has a whole chapter of practical solutions. Don't purchase your groceries from the dollar store, and alternatives. Sugar, she talked about the sugar. She has so many recommendations for ways to try to safeguard your health in a super toxic environment of the system of white supremacy racism. Medical apartheid could be up there too, but just take one. Delectable Negro. Now that's another radically different perspective in terms of rethinking. Whoa, there is a lot of this homoeroticism, and even the food component alone. How much control? We heard that today. Controlling the food of non-white people, making that an element, starving them or poisoning them or whatever it is with food, overfeeding them, malnutrition, whatever it is. But that's a massive component of the delectable Negro and all the rape and sodomy and all the rest of it. But that's how I evaluate the constructive nature of a book. Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? Whew. Just being able to say the title of that book alone. Woo. When I was in California this time last year, just the response that I would get from black people when they would see or hear that title, that alone, like, man, to get them to totally kind of, what? Who knows? Now, I'm not saying that they went and immediately, I got to put my hands on that book and read the whole thing in 2 days. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I saw that repeated. What's that title? Write that down. What? See that? What? Repeatedly. And then, much less now, then you actually read that book as we did last. Hey, how many times do you read a book where you say, hey, I have to make a trip out of state as a result of reading this book? Much less, I have to make a trip out of state and stay for 30 days as a result of reading this book. How many times do you read a book where you end up, I would say, even if I hadn't went to California, let's pretend that never happened. Even still, just being here at the old niggerish University of Washington Library, hundreds of miles away from the epicenter, San Francisco, and where all this took place, and the origins out in Indiana, next to Whitestown. Even if I had just stayed here in the 206, I said then I had thousands of files on Jonestown. That was documentaries, newspaper articles from all over the world, books, oh my God, just journal articles, you name it, dissertations, all kinds of goodies, pictures, all audio, all kinds of goodies. All kinds of goodies. Wow. Radically, the Dr. Marcus Foster, first black superintendent in the state of California. That's a part of Jonestown and the People's Temple. The zebra murders, oh my gosh. Anyway, so much to say. If you are not familiar with Jonestown, the People's Temple, I would humbly say, one, that's one you can have a whole section of books on, and I would even say, hey, there are very few incidents in the last, I would say, 50 years. Assassination of Dr. King, assassination of Malcolm X, that's old history. That's, way more than 50 years older. Way more than 50 years old. Talking about events that have happened within the last 50 years. I would humbly submit Jonestown should probably be on the top 5 in terms of events related to people classified as black, Northwestern Hemisphere, last 50 years, most significant events to happen that have a direct impact. It would be difficult for me to think, like, are there 10 events that would be higher than Jonestown, where you've had that 900 total, like about 2/3 of that's black people. They said about 200 children, most of them black. And then if all of that is a CIA medical experiment to boot, whew. But that would have to be up there with like Katrina, I would think. Last 50, if you all can think, give me a list of events, like just using logic, your brain computer, these events are more significant and why. Say, oh, okay, that would make sense. Election of President Obama, January 6th, I don't know. You could tally them out for me, 9/11. You could tease them out for me, but I mean, it'd be difficult for me to get a chunkier list. But, I'd be willing to listen. Anyway, you just had the 47th year from the massacre. In 3 years, there will probably be lots of material, especially in California. Gus might even have to see if I'm still alive, we're still here. So we'll have things to look forward to, I reckon, to a degree. 2027, the Columbine Files. 2028, that will be 50 years from Jonestown. As I said, they'll probably have a lot of events in California during that time period. Not that it didn't this week, they did last year too, but it wasn't a bunch. I suspect for the 50 year, they will have a lot of stuff, because you'll have people getting older and kind of make sure that they get things on the record before they pass and all of that. Like, oh man, I would, if you're in the California area, or might even put that on the calendar as something to make sure. 2028, that's 50 years. Pay attention. Might be stuff going on all year in Indiana, California. They just made a tourist location out of literal Jonestown in Guyana. That was while we were reading and studying there. I think that was while I was in California. That came out last year. But either so, I mean, they could be having events down there too. So be mindful. I would say your children should not be ignorant. I heard Kool-Aid jokes this week. Got racist joke. There were a lot of racist jokes about Jonestown, like more than you can imagine. But your children should not be ignorant about Jonestown. Hey, 200 children died. White people don't care about children. Black children, black people should not be ignorant about Jonestown, especially if you say, hey, I'm born in the area known as the U.S. I'm so-called African American. Well, hey, this is one of the most important events to happen to so-called African Americans in the last 50 years. You should know quite a bit about this event. I will pause to quickly, just around all of this, I had many people contact me this week to say, on a variety of platforms, Brother Gus, you got to check this out, Jonestown. It was all the same content. It was all the same content. New podcast via YouTube. Now, I've said for years, well, not years, but I've said for a minute, please refrain from sharing your YouTube viewing TV material with me. Thank you kindly. I've said this for years. Haven't taken a long bit of time to explain all that, but the short and tall of it, reading is more important than watching television, and I do not believe that we are going to maximize our brain computers by just doing a lot of all of our counter-racist research, or if the bulk of it is, what did I watch on YouTube? What did I watch on Netflix? Like, come on. I think we can do much, much better. Much. Either way, I don't have the same viewing tastes as you all, and I'm just not. And there's lots of reasons I could give around that, but hopefully that's not too controversial. And if it is, that would further make me suspicious about our addictions to screens and such, because it shouldn't be just Brother Gus can be left off of your, oh, let me share what you watching with it. I don't need to be included. You can just skip me. Saves you some time on your emails, right? One of the other reasons is just like what happened this week. So we're talking like half dozen people and everybody shares the same thing. I might even imply, what's that old tacky cliche, stale at this point, everyone thinks alike. No one thinks, because there was a lot of new reports and information about Jonestown this week. A lot. But everybody sent the same YouTube content. And it took me a moment. It was a year ago that we did the Jonestown, but I said, oh man, that happened when we were reading Jonestown. And I just told you, we went through Jonestown. That's one like, woo, all-star research because there's so much material. Gus did all-star research, went to California. Because I went to California, I now have 2 folders with thousands of files exclusively about Jonestown. And it's all kinds of stuff, documentaries, books, films, lots of, and most of it's not YouTube. Some of it is, but most of it is not. And even, man, you want to watch some Jonestown documentaries? Some of the really good ones are not on YouTube. Just saying. Anyway, but this happened last year. Not all. There were some folks who did great research who, helped added to my thousands of files. Non-Clemson dad took time out from parenting, took time out to go and get some files on the South Carolina connection to Jonestown, which is important, and the state of Delaware, Joe Biden. And I was super appreciative, like, dang, he could have been, making sure his child isn't eating Nestle and all that good stuff, and he's getting us articles. And we had other folks, too, got newspaper reports, and I think Bay Area Mom, she's right there, epicenter of it all, sent newspaper articles and other things. But I would say maybe 3/4, maybe a little more, of the content that people sent me about Jonestown, it was from YouTube. And I just don't think YouTube is the end-all, be-all of counter-racism research on any subject, Jonestown, or anything else. Anyway, and it was the content that was shared, not that there was anything incorrect about it. Leslie Wilson Wagner, I think I jumbled the last name. She has a hyphenated last name. I think it's Leslie Wagner Wilson. There we go. She has a new podcast, Black Female Victim of White Supremacy. Not that there was anything incorrect about her podcast. She's a victim of racism. But, one, she did write a book. It's been out for a minute. You all should read it. I cited it many times as we were going through and reading Jonestown, but also because she's done a lot of content. Like, this is about to be 50 years old, so she wrote a book. She's been in bunches and bunches and bunches and bunches of documentaries. I included her when we were going through reading about Jonestown. Her parents gave, like Gave, not sold for a penny, gave Jim Jones their California house. that would probably be worth like $1 million. I heard that so many times when I was in California last year. Like, woo, black people who owned property in like Mendocino County, in San Francisco specifically, and gave the houses to Jim Jones. These are properties that are like $1 million. Some of this is, like I said, some of this, it's 10 minutes from the coast. It would be beachfront property almost. Gave. Anyway, but that her parents, I included that audio segment, and even in fact when people kept saying, man, why didn't these people leave? I can't believe he tricked them, got them all the way to Guyana. Maybe she'll talk about that in the podcast, like the trickery and how they all ended up in Guyana. But I pointed to her. Miss Wilson, she said, one, she was in People's Temple when she was a child, so that's one, but I just told you her parents gave Jim Jones her house. She was a child. People say, well, why didn't they leave? Why didn't they leave? One, they got armed guards. Two, where are you going to go? I'm 15. They had a lot of young people, and the people, when I say young, like teenagers and such. So where are you going? Your parents have given Jim Jones your house. Where are you going? And you're a minor. He got all those foster children. We read a whole separate book just about that, the children of Jonestown. And I said then, you could escape the People's Temple in California, end up in foster care, and then you still get reprimanded back to Jim Jones. Ugh. Maybe they'll talk about some of that in the podcast. But anyway, there's so much material. In fact, it reminded, and I told the folks after, I even had to put this in context. I have to put this in context. So as people were piling up, hey, Gus, you got to see this podcast. And so I said, well, if she talks about COINTELPRO, the CIA, I'm going to be there to listen every episode. I don't think that's going to happen based on what I've heard her say before, but Victims Guaranteed, Qualified, do what you do. Now, I posted what we read, Catherine Massey Book Club. I'm an expert on Jonestown. I did my research. I got my files by the plenty, by the thousands. I share Michael Mayer's Was Jonestown a CIA Medical Experiment? And in fact, I said, oh yeah, I do got them thousands of files. And I told you there are books, not one, there are whole books that say the same thing Michael Mayer said. Yep, this is a CIA exercise. Whole book. And some of them I said, you go to Berkeley and you got to go and give government identification and you make a formal appointment a week in advance. You got to sit in the quiet library under video surveillance. That's the environment that you got to go in if you want to read, because they got several, I said plural, like more than 2 whole books. What's the whole premise? Jonestown was a CIA exercise of white supremacy racism. So I go and I just start posting, what did we read? What are these books? In fact, I even said it repeatedly. Wasn't that in the newspaper all the time back then? Yep, even the black newspapers. Didn't Dick Gregory talk about this publicly back then? Yep, I just started posting all of that. Some random lame race soldier hopped on my social media. Jonestown was not a CIA experiment. You need to listen to Leslie Wilson Wagner's podcast. I said, that right there is about all I need to know about this podcast. Why you say that, Brother Gus? And nothing to do with Miss Leslie Wilson Wagner. What it's to do with is white people doing what they normally do. And I say, hey, I've been here for 17 years, February. I've never had a white person recommend Neely Fuller Jr.'s book. Like, never, ever, ever. Never had a white person recommend Dr. Welsing's book, Tommy Curry's book, Delectable Negro. There's no book I can think of that is constructive. I learned a lot about white supremacy racism where a white person, they went, you need to read this. No. They come and you need to read The Hate U Give. You need to read taste. That's what they do. They do not come and bring me no construct. You need to get recreational cannabis and some Nestle. That's what they do. I'm not saying that's Miss Wagner Wilson's podcast. I'm just saying, for a white person to come and shush me, don't you say nothing about CIA in Jonestown. You shush. You or Jim Jones coming from Indiana sundown town and KKK land. Shh. This is what is acceptable for you to talk about. I said, that right there. That right there. Y'all not going to bully me about nothing. No podcast, no book, nothing. And I said, secret, I said, ew, y'all going to be here with the white woman? Maybe y'all all on the same street team with the white woman to promote the same podcast. Any hoodles, I wouldn't have felt so confident about all that if I said, oh man, the person that y'all talking about, she did write a book that I have. She did write a book you all could read. Fascinating story about how she and her son escaped from Jonestown, had to hike through the jungle, eek. They had snakes and tigers, eek, and race soldiers, eek. Anyway, oh, wait a minute. I even had to add on this. I said, man, you know, was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? A black person did not write that book. In fact, I just told you there are bunches of books that say Jonestown was a CIA or CIA project of some sort. Black people didn't write any of those books. And I told you last year, black people, and I did have a sense of, man, we have a really lame team, myself included. Like, wow, how did black people not pick this up as something to seriously study and talk about, just to go and get the newspaper clips? Apparently, we didn't do that. Whew. Whew. I said that the whole time I was in California. Just, wow, we must have a really lame team. Gotta be. I went back, I reflected in California. This time last year, I was at the cemetery in Oakland. We were at the gravesite. They had the memorial. It was 46 years last year from the massacre. I had a group of black people, victims. They lost 10 family members in Guyana, all black people killed by Jim Jones, one of them a 5-year-old. I spent the whole day out there. I got there that morning before 9 a.m. and hung out till like 2:30 in the afternoon, all day long. Could have stayed longer. Went to UC Berkeley to get more research, get that book about CIA. Anyway, but I asked this group, and it was like 6 black people, big age group in there, like young or so-called middle 30s, whatever, all the way up to like 80s, 90s. And I said, do you think Reverend Jim Jones is racist? In unison. It was like a choir. They all said, no. And they gave their explanations why and what they thought about him. It was a white person standing next to me. They didn't say no. Anyway, so I was doing my asking questions. I recorded all this. I was going to play some of this today. It was, anyway, but I asked them, did you know Jim Jones was drugging people in the People's Temple, victims? They said no. Oh. They went through the service, and one of the speakers, she shared that Jim Jones' father was in the Indiana Ku Klux Klan. The Indiana was hot KKK territory in the early 20th century. Like, oh man, whoo, may still be. Whitestown, Indiana. And after they finished, one of the black people that I was talking with, she came up to me and she said, wow, you know, Brother Gus, you know, you asked us if we thought Jim Jones was a racist. And I said, no. And she said, they said that Jim Jones' dad was in the Klan. We talked about that because that's in the book. Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? And she said, I didn't know that. And she said, man, I'm going to have to go back and reconsider your question. That is spectacular. I love hearing that because we're going to have to rethink a whole lot about the system of white supremacy racism because we're so poorly informed, and it's deliberate. It really is. But man, I said then, like, dang, it seems like a lot of the people, black people that are really close to this, they're not very informed either. That's not all, because it was one of the victims who had made that commentary about Jim Jones' father being in the Klan. True. But I did see that a lot, or I do see that a lot of the victims, and this is common throughout the system of white supremacy. Tulsa, the what they call Black Wall Street Massacre, about, 50 years before Jonestown, maybe a little less, 48, 47 years previously. But same thing. Neely Fuller Jr., he was born right down the road. Said, I didn't know nothing about it. It was just whispered. I heard that. They had a talk here, university, it was through the University of Washington, where they had a black male come and talk about his book on the Tulsa Massacre earlier this year. Black male was in the audience, a little bit younger than Mr. Fuller. He said he grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he did not know nothing about any of this. He said he didn't even hear about it until he had moved like thousands of miles away, and 50 years had passed, and someone mentioned it. He said, wait a minute, I'm from there. Wait a minute, what happened? What now? It's not our fault. It doesn't make it any better. White people do this deliberately, but I've seen that pattern pretty consistently, that victims of white supremacy, we're not informed about white supremacy racism. And yeah, I mean, they said the people in Guyana were ignorant about Jonestown. They were literally a block from the compound, and they didn't know nothing before, during, or after, because they had such tight control on the newspapers and media in Guyana that we had a guest on the program last year. He said black people in Guyana, they were having to call here and to England and Toronto and get their cousins who had moved to other parts of the globe. Say, Leroy, do you know what's happening down the road here? Because they won't tell us nothing. System of white supremacy. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And victims of racism, Gus T at the top of the list. We are not very powerful. We are not very informed. Sometimes even about how we have been, not sometimes, frequently, I would even say most of the time, we are not very informed about how we have been mistreated. You put Gus T at the top of that list too. Hopefully the cows, to some small degree, working to correct that. But yes, of the Jonestown material, I'm always more excited. The content that's going to talk direct drugs. Dr. Marcus, put this in a greater context. Even, in fact, I would be overjoyed. Put this in context of, didn't Jonestown, the massacre, happen like 2-3 years after the Tuskegee syphilis experiment was exposed? That had been going for quite some time, but weren't these kind of concurrent events too? And the COINTELPRO. They would have to put all that together because these are all same time period of events, and they're all related. If they're not going to talk about it from that level, then, but might as well just go back to making Kool-Aid jokes. Anywho, November 18, massively important day. We should know lots, and maybe even read some more books on Jonestown, because there are plenty. That's one, like, you should have definitely books in your library on Jonestown. Books in your library on Jonestown. Anywho, let's see. The audio segments that we heard, I'll just see if I could do a few quickly, then we'll get to folks who dialed in. They were talking about the ICE raids in North Carolina. They spoke with one of the black so-called politicians there, and he said that he seemed a little disgruntled, I'll say, about ICE agents coming in and not really talking or involving local officials and explaining what they were trying to accomplish and all the rest of it. And he said, they're coming into our community. You don't have a community if armed thugs can just run up and down your community streets anytime they feel like it. And you can't say, whoa. You can't come in here. Stop right there. We do not authorize your presence. You turn around and get your hind parts out of here right now. If you have a community, that's what you do. They don't even try that sort of thing. You don't. They even asked Ray, they say, do you think it's because y'all got so many of these Negro officials down in Charlotte that y'all not being involved in the talk? Yes, I think that's what it is. Yes. That's not a community. You all are just victims of rape. Is that black male privilege? Never mind. Incidentally, it sounded just like what's happening in the Dominican Republic, except they probably got people who are not white. But if you look Haitian, I don't know what that is, but if you look like you could be Haitian, get on out of here. Anti-blackness for sure. I know Fuller used to talk about that all the time. Like, that island is so small where Haiti and the Dominican Republic are. Like, is it that much of a difference in how the people look in the Dominican Republic as opposed to Haiti? I'm just saying, I mean, I know they speak French on the one side and Espanol on the other, but I mean, really? They look that different that you can just look at someone and, oh, yeah, you one of them Tucson niggers. Get on, back, get. Really? I'm ignorant. I haven't been there, so, I don't know. Let's see. The Sierra Club in California. I tripped out so hard. I lived in California for years. I did not ever, ponder the Sierra Club joining, nothing like that. They said that they had peak membership and they're raking in millions of dollars when they're just focused on the trees. Once they say, hey, we got all this money, we got all these people, we could do a lot more. True. Why don't we do something about racism? Whoa. We don't. In my opinion, hey, we could just start right at home. Forget George Floyd. That's in a whole nother time zone. Like, we could just be right here. In fact, forget Rodney King too. Forget O.J. Simpson. We could just go right to John Muir. Let's just deal with him. We'll clean our own house and then maybe we'll get to everybody else. I said, man, I didn't really know, because they said John Muir. They said in the report they came after John Muir. This is David Fahrenthold, white man. He got his Pulitzer for writing about Donald Trump's organizations. He said that they came for John Muir. I don't know what that is. That's a metaphor. I think John Muir is dead. So what does that mean exactly? Do you mean that did they talk about his racist commentary? To me, that's significantly different than they came for, whatever that means. I didn't really know, like, what did John Muir say? So they talk about the AI. I said, let's ask the AI. Hey, what did John Muir say that was racist? And the AI said, oh, Brother Gus, he had all these comments say about the Indians and called them savages, and he said these stereotypes about black people and all the rest of it. And I said, stereotypes about black people? What? See, you doing the same thing that white people do, Gemini. You did the details. I said, be specific, man. What did John Muir say about black people specifically? Hey, I said, oh, gosh, Brother Gus. Okay, Brother Gus, look here. He says, 1867, journal documenting his 1,000-mile walk to the Gulf. Key points: Muir used an offensive racial slur, Sambo, to refer to black people. Stereotypes of laziness. He reinforced harmful stereotypes related to work ethic. In one passage he wrote, "The Negroes are easygoing and merry, making a great deal of noise and doing little work. One energetic white man, working with a will, would easily pick as much cotton as half a dozen Sambos and Sallies." End quote. Now, they say the AI gets slopped sometimes and be making up quotes and all that, but I mean, dang, we did just listen to that lengthy report where they said the Sierra Club, that's what they were talking about. They just didn't give us the specifics. Now, I gave you the quotes and all that so we can verify, make sure that that's true. But man, we could just sit right here and talk about that. We're going to read 1,000-Mile Walk to the Gulf and talk about this and see has this influenced the group. Does anyone else here talk this way? Does anyone else use the term Sambo? Sally's? Oh man, they could. Now, if there was the same sort of tumult and I didn't join up to no Sierra Club to talk about no Sambos and Sally's. And John Muir, he's dead now, and I don't want to talk about that and go through all this, and I just want to talk about the trees and the wolves. Well, it's the namesake, and he found, I mean, now, if they had groused and griped that way, let's get that on record. I don't know if we need to investigate and all the rest of it, but I mean, oh man, everybody put that on record. We don't think this is important. I don't want to hear nothing about no Sallys and Sambos. We just here to talk about the wolves. Just put that on, record. No problem. Committed, but dedicated to white supremacy racism. Committed. They said, let's put our priorities up. They said, environment, wolves, rain, trees, forest. The last priority, niggers. Wait a minute. They got whole, books, and you can go get a whole degree, environmental racism, and the niggers ain't got no trees, and it's really, really hot where the niggers have to stay at, and the niggers are really, really catching it from climate change. Hey, the population up in Alaska, they just had the flood and everything. It's so many different ways. If you really, climate change and all of that impacting dark people, we could do it that way. So we still focused on the water and the environment and cleaning that up, making it better and getting rid of coal and all that. And we help out the dark people because they are really suffering under climate change. Just want to get them wolves back. And I'm up here snickering. I said, wait a minute. I'm at the University of Washington. Ain't they got that big Husky out there? It's Husky Stadium. Dr. Welsing, she was here 31 times as a guest. You better have to learn something. Romulus and Remus. The wolf mean more to the dog and it. No. We get to the wolf later. They had a documentary at the Seattle International Film Festival this year about the exact same thing. We got to get the wolves back in Washington State, and they're an important part of the ecosystem too. And we can peacefully coexist with Wolfie. And can Leroy? We get to Leroy. But they got the statue of the Husky out. They don't have no statues to niggers at the University of Washington, I don't think. I have to look to find, but they got multiple statues of wolves. I'm going to look and see if I can find me a statue of a nigger at UW. Let's see. They said they were making members take purity tests. I don't know what that means either. What? Now, if they ask, do you say Sambo? Is that a purity test? And then even Madeline Brand, that's the white host for KCRW, she was talking to David Farenhold, and she said that they really stepped into it. They said they're not going to do no more bird watching in Israel. What does that mean? Stepped into it? That almost sounds like we talking about poo or something. They had so many metaphors in that report. They sounded so flippant in the way that they talked about it, saying that you can't say vibrant. These guys are crackpots. What is wrong with them? I had never heard that before in terms of vibrant. Now, if they had just given the details about what John Muir said, as opposed to being even flippant about that, they came for John Muir. Hey, read that Sally's and Sambo's comment. How about that? And then tell me, was the purity test, hey, do you say Sambo? be flipping about that. I don't want to hear nothing about no vibrant, even though I'd never heard that before. I've just never heard, don't use the term vibrant. Like but still learning. Let's see. They got the National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism. One, did they have a definition for anti-Semitism? Even Semite. And then, did they have a National Task Force to combat anti-blackness? To combat the system of white supremacy? Just asking. Like, wow. How much power do they have? Do they have like subpoena power? What type of budget do they have? The National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism. Who's on there? Do they have a hit list of like people that they were out? Because they said we were focused on left-wing anti-Semitism, and now we got to shift to right-wing. Like, woo, man. Let's see. The segment when they got to talking about the food and white people, because they said you got these big corporate giants. I'm pretty sure that's not no dark people on the continent. That's not the dark people of Haiti, dark people of the Caribbean. I'm pretty sure that's people classified as white, behind Lunchables and all the rest of it. They said that it is not accidental that this food that is killing everybody, it has been deliberately engineered. Duh. System of white supremacy. It's not no accident. Get lots of people eating really bad. It's not even food, as they said. It's not even food. And there's been so many reports coming out, just all these obese children, and same thing, eating all this ultra-processed food that we've been addicted to for a long time. I said that. You got so many generations of folks just microwave everything or DoorDash everything, Lunchables, chips. You got probably at least 2-3 generations of that at this point. So you have people that are really disconnected from what is food. I'd say that consistently, even if you did give some folks like, hey, I got $50 worth of fresh organic produce from the farmer's market or wherever, got to go out of town, all of a sudden, here you go. Just take it. I just don't have time to use it. Bon appetit. You gave them a bushel of Brussels sprouts. Like, what? You microwave these? I'm saying, come on. Probably some of the folks listening right now. You got to do wait, and I said especially with children. They gave that report about Nestle selling baby food to the Africans with added sugar. Now they got about 1 billion reports talking about sugar and diabetes and get no sugar and cut down on that sugar and cut down on that sugar, and they're going to add sugar. This for the babies. Why is that? In fact, they talk about breastfeeding. They talk about white moms and all that. Here it's breastfeeding, not added sugar. Breastfeeding. That's the best. We had skimmed. Andrea Friedman on the program. They talked about we worked to get black moms on formula. Yeah, you need to get the Cerelac. We want the white mom breastfeeding. The breast is best. The breast is best. And you got to eat well if you're going to breastfeed. I know that. I've been around moms who breastfeed. You can't be eating Lunchables, chocolate bars, potato chips, Cheetos, KFC, alcohol. You can't be doing all that if you're going to breastfeed. You got to eat reasonably healthy if you're going to breastfeed, especially if you're going to do it for, a sustained period of time, as is recommended. But that's what the African, oh no, sugar, get some more of that diabetes on you, sugar, get some of that obesity on you. Hopefully we can get some of that childhood obesity on you. And it's so much research. They talk about your taste buds and what you're going to have food preferences. That stuff develops early in life. You're messing around and getting all that sugar, then you're going to be cookies and pies and sweets and sodas and Coca-Cola, fast diabetes, everything that they're talking about, where you not only are you going to have a shorter lifespan, you're going to have a lower quality of life because you're going to have all kinds of health problems. That's what they want, especially dark people. But that's insidious. Like, man, come on. They say they don't put all that sugar in the formula that's going for the white people. Come on, I think Nestle, that's the same people they got accused of poisoning water supplies in areas where non-white people live, like India and such. I think that's the exact same people poison their water supply, and then you got to buy our water that costs $1 billion. Same people, usual suspects, race soldiers. They talked about the restrictions on MSG. We did hear the report that was racism, monosodium glutamate, and that some of those so-called restrictions or suggestions that it not be used have been curtailed and or eliminated because it wasn't based on science, it was based on racism. Double check, make sure I'm not lying to you all on that, but we did just hear that report. When they were talking about the sugar being added, it reminded me of the relationship between racism and black people and sugar. Henry in Chicago said they went to the museum in Washington, D.C. before the shutdown, and he and his wife, they saw the exhibits on sugar and rum and how many black people died and getting all this rum and cane sugar and all sugar cane, and she said it had such a traumatic impact on her that she said, I'm not consuming any more sugar. Remember that. This would be another one you could add to it. We're going to poison the African babies with the sugar. Let's see. When they had the segment on Mercedes Wells, black mommy in labor, they made her wait 6 hours, and then as she was about to go into labor, they said, get out of here. And they kicked her out, and she ended up giving birth in her vehicle. Yikes. That's another one. Why, folks? Serena Williams almost died in childbirth. Man, some people say, hey, I'm going to get my midwife and do my plan to have my birth at home so I don't have to go through any of that if I'm healthy enough to do so. I cannot imagine how traumatizing that was for everyone involved. And importantly, put that on Jim Jones. Where did that happen at? Mercedes Wells. Where'd she try to go to the hospital at? In Crown Point, Indiana. I bet that's right down the road from Whitestown, Indiana. But Crown Point, Indiana, just like Whitestown, Indiana, is a racially restricted region. That might be one to think about if you are going to have a child. Are we in a racially restricted region? Do we want to try to go to the hospital in a racially restricted region? Just something to think about. And James Lowen's website, what does he have from Crown Point, Indiana? I visited Crown Point in 1955. My friend there told me it was a sundown town. I was from Alabama and had never heard of such a thing. James Lowen's book talks about how sundown towns were more of a northern thing. Email testimony from August 2014. I lived there as a teen from the mid-'70s to the early '80s. More than once I heard tales of signage that read, "If black, don't let the sun set on your back." According to these stories, the signage was there in the 50s, though I never saw one, even an old one in someone's garage or anything, and the people there seemed to collect everything. So I'd say any official signage is probably untrue, but homemade ones might be true. Any threat of violence was low to non-existent, at least among those in my age group. It's more of a small town that wants to be left alone. In the 90s, the high school graduated its first black student. Oh, and they even, one extra I'll give, all but one in the 1960s were males in terms of the people allowed, black people in Crown Point. 43 of the 51 black residents in 1940 were male. Now, something about that, James Lowen talked about that. Sometimes when you have numbers like that, it's either there's a prison in the area, and they do include the prison population in the sentence, so it could be that, or the servants. Sometimes white people, they would allow, if you have like a Negro butler, servant, driver, maid, whatever, your nigger boy, they will allow them. Maybe they can even live in the house with you. So I suspect it's either they were inmates or servants, and it's not much of a difference, because sometimes you remember Life, they make the inmates the servants. Eddie Murphy, let's see, the I will just say this segment on Kyron Lacey reminded me greatly of Marshawn Nealon, and even as it transitioned to the section on Nyck Harbor, privileged black male who plays for the South Carolina Gamecocks. One word. He scored an 80-yard touchdown, and importantly, they have so little empathy for the black male. In most of the reports in this incident, he scores his 80-yard touchdown, and then the bully with a badge and a gun who has not been identified for Texas DPS. You know what DPS stand for? Texas Department of Public Safety. Isn't that a joke? You're supposed to be there for safety. A black male privileged scores an 80-yard touchdown, and he's limping. You can see it. It's clear if you got HD, even if you don't have HD TV, it's clear. He's pulling at his hamstring like, oh my God, I done pulled a hamstring. Jesus Christ. Ooh, can I get to the tent? Ooh, need a massage, water, bananas. The white DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, he said, ooh, medic, nope. Oh, you okay, black brother? Because this is a child. You did hear the white man say, he bulldozed those kids. Yes, this is college football, so these are children. The white Texas Department of Public Safety officer with a badge and a gun, he elbowed, exactly, he took his, if you haven't seen, he took his elbow, shoulder, and pow, bust right through. And this is 3 Negro male football players, and he just bust through like, get out of my way, out here walking, and you done score. And this is the visiting team scored the touchdown, so he mad like y'all gonna come in here and beat my team. Just get the hell out of my way. What? The black male who just scored the touchdown, Mr. Harbor, he didn't turn around like, who do you think you are? I'm a privileged black male. I'll drop you in your head right now. Oh, don't you touch me? No, it was like, hey, what'd you do that for? I almost pulled my hamstring. Like, that's what he turned around like, what was that for? Did you see that? He just shouldered us. And the cop stuck his finger out, the Texas Department of Public Safety officer put his finger, don't you talk to me, black boy. Get out of here. Get out of this tunnel right now. I'll take you outside right now. They didn't identify him. I haven't even heard reports that he was fired, suspended without pay. None of that. Was he back at the game this week? Public safety. That's black male privilege too. Anyway, let's see. The Gavin Weisenberg and Tanner Thomas, they're going to do a coup in Haiti. I thought it was why they said they were going to kill the black dudes. They were going to make sex slaves of the women and children. What is, what I also thought was, wow, they said, isn't this unusual? I've never heard anything like this before. I said, wait a minute. White people going to an area with a lot of black people, they're going to kill and enslave the black dudes and rape all the females? Yes, I think I've heard that. It's vaguely familiar, a little bit. Yes. It's a little old, in fact, but yes. In fact, I was kind of thinking like some of the white people had to be going like, haven't we already done that to this area? Did we already get them? I think we already got, I think y'all might be late. I think y'all are late, but yeah, you're not supposed to get caught doing all that. But yeah, I think we already got them niggers. You're late. A century or so late, I think, but late. Let's see. I will just say the Castle Doctrine defense in Whitestown, Indiana, which is also a racially restricted region, I submit that that's going to fail. I've heard the Castle Doctrine many times. In fact, there was a case in Wisconsin. Black male snuck into a garage. He was at a party, and the police came. He snuck into one of the adjoining houses' garage to hide from the police. The white homeowner, terrified, oh my God, a raping Negro has broken into my house, shot and killed him. And then they found like, oh man, this is one of those, idiots who was at the party next door. He wasn't trying to rob us. He was trying to hide from. But dead is dead, so, whatever. And he said, Castle Doctrine. I thought he was trying to break in my house and rape my wife. And they said, yeah, that's reasonable. Castle Doctrine, boom, not guilty. And they moved on. But the important component is the reasonable force is if you are in the residents. They said, you think this is an unlawful entry. Well, nothing about this. Miss Perez was trying to break into the house. She's got a mop, a broom, Windex. Why are you firing through the door? You could have said, hey, back up, wench, get out of here. That would have been enough. He fired through the door and talk about cat. Nope. You are going to be convicted. Now, he's a white man, so we'll have to see, but the jury of his peers. We'll see how many dark people are on the jury in Whitestown. But he should be convicted. Even, in fact, when the prosecuting attorney, white man, when he came out and he said, I believe in Second Amendment rights. You have a right to defend yourself, stand your ground. I believe in all that. But this case has nothing to do with that. I even thought that was like, wow, do you have to bow to white gun owners that much? I mean, why does that even need to be said if this case has nothing to do with stand your ground, which I am of the opinion it does not. In fact, the lead could have just been, this is a cowardly, criminal white man. We do not want a society of dirty Harrys. Make my day. You knock on my door and I blow your brains out through the door. I don't even answer. I don't even take a moment to halt. Who goes there? Who is it? Are you a rapist? Because I got my gun. You don't even take 30 seconds to do any of that? I'm going to just shoot through the... No. This ain't got nothing to do with stand your ground. Make it clear. Hey, anybody else out there, don't be thinking I got my Glock and I'm just... You make my... We're going to be civilized. Somebody knock at the door. That's not let me get to shooting. Use your words. That's what they're saying. Use your words. Who goes there? You got door cams and all that stuff. It's almost 2026, man. You can look out the window. She got a broom? I don't know if she's going to sodomize me with the broom. I'll at least... I get my gun and give her 30 seconds. If it looks like she's going to be aggressive and move towards my rectum, then we blow her brains away. But maybe she's confused. They don't have good English. That's reasonable. Not, I'm going to blow somebody. You've seen a lot of those kids. They just get to shooting people through the... Come on. He should be under the jail. He should have been identified. And the white Texas bully, racist Department of Public Safety officer, he should have been identified too. He wouldn't have done that even if it had been a road team. If it had been a white player who scored a touchdown, I humbly submit he would not have went and I'm a bulldoze this white child because I'm mad you didn't score a touchdown on my team. I got to bully you with my badge. And like, get out of here. Do your job, man. Be a professional. You that much of a fan, take your badge and gun off. Go home and root, get your beer and root. You can curse. You could have called him all kinds of niggers and coons and everything else, but a typical racist fan. Department of Public Safety. That's the people who were in the chase with Marshawn Nealon, who committed suicide. Dallas Cowboys, Texas, but that was the Texas Department of Public Safety too. They made the announcement about what happened to Marshawn Nealon, DPS. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. Woo. Get my water. Not sure if folks, did anybody see any commentary related to Jonestown? Not sure. Folks had a chance. I know they got the podcast, got that one, but if any other commentary related to Jonestown, or if you're anywhere where they had ceremonies, memorials, anything of that nature, that would be grand. Hear any information, thoughts, updates. If anybody saw that, I would think people in California, LA or Bay Area, probably, and maybe even Indiana. I don't know if we have people in the Indiana area, but those would be locations, so I would think. And I guess Delaware and South Carolina too. Yeah, if there are folks, they had any sort of ceremonies or events about Jonestown in your area, or if you saw anything online, let us know. That would be grand. And then any other thoughts on what the clips, news segments that we heard for the week. If we have any folks, do we have any folks who participated in the Sierra Club at all? Any folks? Like I said, I lived in California. I was not all environmental. I did eventually become, vegan while I lived in California, which is kind of close to all that, concern about the environment and all the rest of it without the racism component. But I didn't do no bird watching. I didn't do no environment. I didn't do no planting trees or anything of that nature. If you had asked me, like, who's John Muir? I'm like, I'm not sure. Let me go, do some searching. But I had not heard of any. I was just not knowledgeable. But if we have any non-white, they said it's uber white, right? So if any non-white people get recruited or any knowledge about the Sierra Club, let us know. Because I don't do no bird watching. I wasn't, an outdoorsy person growing up. Let's watch television. Let's play video games. Like they said, it's white people. They said it's old and for white people with money. They want to go out and get the wolves back in Colorado and get the wolves back in Washington State. All that foolishness. Anyway, let's see. Lauren should be with us. If you have commentary, proceed.
Yes, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hello. Evening, everyone. About the segments that were played, when you talked about that segment where ICE or the Border Patrol was in Charlotte, North Carolina, I thought it was a black male talking, and he said people were sheltering in their homes as if they are prisoners. And I thought to myself, they are. That's why they call jail greater confinement. I mean, yeah. Also, he said they're here to wreak havoc on communities and divide families. I don't know about the communities part, but yeah, it does seem like they're there to wreak havoc and divide families. I don't know exactly what anti-Semitism is. Where the segment where you were talking about Nestle adding the sugar to the baby foods in Africa and India, but they weren't doing this in Europe. I read this book called Ultra Processed People, and in that book, Nestle was sending boats down the Amazon filled with ultra processed food, and they were getting it, selling it to non-white people, and just affecting their health. And they even said, the essence of our program is to reach the poor. So that was their focus. They just wanted to reach non-white people who didn't have a lot of money. The Wyandotte County case where Fatherly kills Charles Adair by kneeling on his back, and then they held it's not a trial, but I guess it was a murder case on Zoom, and then what I assumed was a white man, he gets to do this in his lawyer's office and then go to his residence and sleep in his own bed. I can't imagine that being able to happen if he was a black male. In Haiti, when the part where the two people from, I think it was Dallas, Texas, wanted to go to Haiti, take over one of the islands, kill the men, and turn the women into sex slaves. Jeffrey Dahmer, he wanted to do that. Like all those people he killed, like that was his thing. He wanted to turn them into sex slaves. He wanted to turn them into zombies, but it wasn't exactly going like that, so he was killing them. But he did do those experiments with drilling the holes in their brain and trying to put the chemicals in there to get them to just act the way he wanted them to act, have sex, but not touch him, however that works. Also, I read an article in the New York Times. It was called Recycling Lead for U.S. Car Batteries is Poisoning People, Non-White People. And this was in Nigeria. And, New York Times goes over here and They test a bunch of people who are living around these factories. And, 56 adults get tested, 41 have dangerous levels of lead, 14 children got tested, 8 had dangerous levels of lead. All 16 of the workers who were tested had dangerous levels of lead. They tested the dust and the soil. It was up to 186 times as high as what is generally recognized as hazardous. And more than 20,000 people live within a mile of this factory. Well, it's several factories in a place called Gijo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. And they said that lead poisoning worldwide is estimated to account for more deaths each year than malaria and HIV/AIDS combined. And the U.S. imported enough lead from Nigeria to make millions of batteries for car makers, Amazon, Lowe's, and Walmart. And they went to Europe, and they said the recycling factories are spotless. And it was another part of the article. They said that Nigerian officials are ill-equipped to monitor any of this. And I don't know. White people can come over, give you all the information. This is exactly how much lead is in your blood, but the non-white people in that part of the world are ill-equipped to monitor any of it. That's all I have. Gus, did you ask any questions before I started talking? I think you asked a question about something.
The Sierra Club, if folks had any experiences, and then, because I ignorant about John Muir and all that, I didn't hang out outdoors, and then Jonestown being this week, if folks saw anything, reports, related to Jonestown.
Okay, so I've heard of the Sierra Club, not a member, and I hadn't really heard anything about Jonestown, but I've been traveling, so not reading a paper as much as I usually do. Okay, thanks.
For sure. The much obliged Lauren, the definition for anti-Semitism, I'm super eager for that myself. I just shared the report she was talking about with the auto industry's lead recycling program, poisoning people. That same thing that they said with the sugar, right? They said they put all the sugar in the baby food that's going to go to the black people on the continent. The baby food that's going to Europe, they don't put all that sugar in it. She said with the recycling factories for these batteries, it's, oh my goodness, they got lead poisoning and it's terrible for the people and they're all toxic. You go and look at these facilities for the white people in Europe, spotless, clean, take safety precautions. Like, come on. And Nigeria, importantly, according to UNICEF, they're supposed to have 1 billion people, probably lots of dark people, by 2100. They've been talking about this for about a good decade, and they have lots of oil in Nigeria. So I said this is one of those areas we should pay attention to, because they'll probably have lots of projects and programs for population tailoring. And what can we do? There's supposed to be 1 billion by 2100. Can we slow it? Can we keep that to 750 million? Can we cut it by just a little bit more? Can we delay it, or what can we do? Or can we get them really sick? Yeah, it might be 1 billion people there, but half of them, their brain computer is Freddie Gray. We got them. They do that sort of thing. 2 times a terrible thing to waste. Harriet A. Washington talked about that for Brazil. Same thing, where you have areas with large populations of dark people. Like, let's see how much lead we can dump on them. Just She had that big passage in there talking about they had all that lead down in Brazil, and they had all the rates of violence and homicide, and it drives you crazy. Yes, and white people have known this for a very, very long time. In fact, I had already written it down. I had it written down about the food and white people making all this money manufacturing toxic Lunchables and Funyuns and Cheetos and all this toxic food to kill us, the beverages too, but just the food part. I mean, the edible munchy stuff there, and then all the beverages too. But all of that being done deliberately and then they spread confusion about it. There is a whole book that talks about that, and they made up a whole word, agnotology, agnotology, agnotology. And they even in the book, they talk about how they came to come up with this word, why they called it that. They have a whole chunky chapter just about lead and how white people have known this is toxic for like way over a century, and they deliberately lie, deliberately do things to cause confusion, and well, it's not settled, and they call it junk science, lie, to make it seem like the issue is not settled, and it's still being debated, and there are multiple sides to when that's not the case at all. Like, they have known, this lead stuff is toxic, mess your brain up. Well, we gonna lie, we still gonna dump it on these dark people. Why we got all these lead pipes, but the food, same thing. Make it confusing. Is the sugar bad for you? Maybe it isn't. Are eggs bad for you? Maybe they're not. All of that. By design, maybe the Lunchables aren't so bad. Agnotology, master deceivers. They lie and lie and lie. Make it so difficult to get accurate information. She talked about the Charles Adair in Wyandotte. That's Roger Golubsky area where he did get to be on Zoom. I too think it would be kind of difficult to imagine a black dude. You've killed a white man, kneeled on him, you George Floyded him, and they are going to let you go through the criminal proceeding on Zoom? I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Much obliged, Lauren. *61 for other folks. I was looking to make sure I felt like there was another important report when they were talking about Kyron Lacey. This is not the black male football player who was shoved. This is the black male football player who there is, I guess, conflict about whether or not he was involved in this accident. And it seemed the enforcement agency now is saying, well, we never said that he caused the wreck or what have you. We're just saying he had some sort of criminal responsibility in all of this, and he took his own life. Marshawn Nealon. But in that segment, they got the former LSU white football coach, Chip Kelly. He came and talked about how emotional Kyron Lacey was and his love of football and all of that. Kyron Lacey's family reportedly is not happy with how former Coach Kelly dealt with and talked about their son, who many believe people at the Louisiana police have lied on him and falsely accused him in all of this and caused his mental health breakdown for him to take his own life. But Chip Kelly, suspected racist. Mr. Lacey's parents are not pleased with him. And I said he's ex-coach. He's one of those football coaches, white male football coaches who I was talking about where I said, man, I picked the wrong profession. I should have been a football coach. He got fired, doing a poor job. He got a $54 million buyout. Now, this is one you have to put the asterisk next to it because it's being contested. Louisiana State is trying to not pay him and saying they fired him with cause, so they don't have to pay him that full $54 million, so we have to go to court. This will probably be settled, so maybe he won't get 54, maybe it'll just be like 30. Lawyer fees, 20. But I mean, even still, you get fired for doing a poor job and you get a $20 million. He could get the whole thing. Could be $54 million. Whew. I picked the wrong profession, and he's a suspected racist. Let's see. She said she did mention Lauren. She was talking about the two white fellas going down to do the kidnapping and the similarities with Jeff Dahmer. I don't remember him recruiting an army. Like, that is like, dang. You're going to go and rape and pillage in Haiti, probably raping children too, because they say they were going to kill the men and make sex slaves of the women and children. How Jeffrey Epstein, right? So they're going to do all this. They said they were going to go and get an army of homeless people so now we have like a whole platoon of folks when we drop in on the island. We rock them bammers. We'll have our ghost guns and boom, there'll be no match for them. They'll be starving anyway, so we'll take them over real quick. Like, what? What? What does it mean to be white? Who even sits around? This was like right when the cows started. I was talking to a non-white 5-year-old, and his parents appropriately spoke to him about racism at a young age. So he was already having conversations and thinking about racism. He was about to go. It was night time. He was about to go to bed. He said, well, Brother Gus, you know, I've been thinking on it. Non-white people that I'm around, my sister, family members, you, people I go to school with and such, they do not sit around and think about harming people all the time. Apparently, white people just sit around and think about harming non-white people all the time. Our brains must be different. Well, Brother Gus, it is bedtime. I'm going to holler at you. Deuces. And he went to bed. I said, wait a minute. It's bedtime. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like, wow. Talk to your children honestly. Early. He was 5. Talk to your children early and honestly about racism. But that would be an example. And these are not old. They said Gavin Weisenberg, but he got German ancestors. He was 21. These are white folks in their 20s, and what are you doing? They're not sitting around thinking, we can get this Bitcoin. We're going to travel. We're going to go to school. We go Texas A&M, man. We got good football teams, Join Texas Department of Public Safety. We bulldoze and bully Negro football players coming out building, man. We got a lot of free white 21. And we're in Texas. World is our oyster, right? Nah, what were you thinking about? Well, I guess the world is our oyster metaphor. We're going to go to Haiti. We're going to take over them niggers. We're going to kill them nigger males, privileged, and then we'll rape everybody else. Who even thinks? What does it mean to be white? Who even thinks like, what does it mean to be white? Who even thinks like that? Who even thinks like that? 21. Man, 21. That's a trial I would pay attention to if I was down in the Texas region. Like, oh man, if you had time or I had time, I would go to court there too. Like, especially if they're gonna testify. Like, oh man, like, let's see the evidence. Like, did they have notebooks and such where they plotted all this out logistically? Weapons? What? Come on. If I had children and I lived in Texas, I'd want to go to the Waco Carmelo Anthony where he stabbed that killed that white student, the track meet. I'd want to go to that one, and then I'd want to go to this one. What does it mean to be white? Take over Haiti. He gonna get the poorest, most we're gonna get some homeless people, and get some dark people there, and then we're gonna go to the Haitian folks. Are you seeing? They've been talking about the whole place is in desperation, and oh my goodness, and the gangs took over, and we're not going to help. We're going over to take over and rape. Whew. Anyway, anybody else commentary they want to make sure they get in before we wrap things up? We should be here on Wednesday looking forward, talking about the lack of black educators, probably even fewer now if they're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education. Not that, Lakeisha and Leroy ran the Department of Ed, but if they're going to be getting rid of all of that, I kind of process all of that is we should really be trying to get rid of public education, which a lot of white people have been saying anyway. And if it's not going to be white children there, it's going to be a lot of dark children. Yes, let's do away with public education, or at least let's leave it in ruins. That's kind of my thought process, and I could easily see a lot of that being, we're just not going to have very many. We'll have massive teacher shortages. We'll just have lots of bot teachers and that sort of thing. Could be that, but I could not see that in any way being constructive, where all of a sudden we're going to have a glut of black educators. So, yeah, in fact, they were saying that in those firings and such, it was a lot of black people at the Department of Education that were getting fired and such, or nervous about their job, especially if it had anything to do with DEI. So, civil rights, any of that. Anyway, Wednesday, we'll talk about the lack of black educators, and then stay tuned just in case we drop. I totally neglected holiday. I'm gonna do all those horror days. So if you are, planning in the middle of all of that for so-called Thanksgiving and all the rest of it, stay constructive. Folks are traveling and such. I think Lauren said she was traveling. She didn't say she was traveling for no turkey or anything, but still, be safe if you are out and about doing all of that. If you are around attempted family, keep it constructive, avoid conflict. I would mention it seems like there have been so many things happening. Wow. Whatever that you think you can bring up without causing conflict. If you have people that are interested in food, I would bring up Nestle. I would bring up childhood hypertension. I would bring up D'Angelo. Probably, man, if I was around black people, like, come on. And Chadwick Boseman, because he got his star in Hollywood. This time last year, I was in Hollywood, I would have for sure, I got a picture of Mahalia Jackson, I would have got a picture of Chadwick Boseman's star. Like, wow. That would not have been a fun day, but I would have put that on my mission. Like, wherever that one is, let me go get a picture before I get my hind parts back to Washington State. But I would make sure to bring that up. Like, man, if we care about each other and, we want to do these little get-togethers and eat and, get updates, how you doing, how was your year and all that, how your children doing and blah, 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 how's your business going or whatever else, man, let's make sure we're taking care of ourselves and not eating every ultra-processed, ultra-sugary item. Let's try and get some more vegetables. Let's try and get some more fiber. Let's figure out what to do with them Brussels sprouts, butternut squash, cabbage, green beans, beets, carrots, bok choy. I love that bok choy. But eating good, eating vegetable, getting away from all that sugar, chips, and ultra-processed foods and such. Like, man, D'Angelo. I'll just keep bringing that. D'Angelo. And then we can go play, one of his songs. Like, man, did y'all see that? Man, yeah. Don't want that to be us. So we're going to eat a little bit better. We're going to take care of it. We go take a walk. We eat. We go take a walk. We'll listen to a little D'Angelo and talk, whatever healthy foods. We're going to talk some recipes for Brussels sprouts and all that. We'll make that our commitment. So we get together, we eat. This time next year, we do our dinner and it'll be healthy. We'll have lots of healthy foods, zucchini, figure out how to do all that. Make some yams. It'll be great. What is on your plate is counter racism. Said that at the retreats repeatedly. What is on your plate? Even, in fact, starting before you have children. I keep saying that. We read that's a terrible thing to waste. Judith Van Layson, you are what your grandparents ate. Oh man, if you have children before that even gets started, we got to get our diet correct. Get all these potato chips out of here. Get all these Cheetos out of here. We don't even have to eat them. Give them away, do whatever, but get our diet correct. If that means educating, if that means taking cooking classes, if that means going and getting cookbooks, They got resources online, YouTube. They got all kinds of cooking channels and everything else, all of the above. Whatever that is, you got parents or relatives that cook well. I'm going to go hang out with them on the weekend. We'll go and cook a meal together. They can teach tips, cook with me until I kind of get my training wheels off in the kitchen. But, man, you keep hearing massive reports all over the world. Food, death. Food is killing us. Food, death. Food is killing us by design. They said that today, not by accident, deliberately. White people are killing us with food. Be very intentional with your food and diet, especially around the sugar. I would say process anything that's in a bag that makes a lot of noise, really crinkly and loud. Anything, whole lot of sugar. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, try and do better. I know those are expensive. White people make it difficult. White people make it difficult to eat well. That is a part of our challenge as attempted counter-racists, because, man, they want us getting all them chips and McDonald's. That's exactly what they want us nibbling. And apparently from, like, the crib, that's exactly what they want us snacking on. Any hoodles. At minimum, we'll be here on Wednesday. New book on Friday. We'll certainly know by Wednesday what the new book is, but we'll be here on Wednesday. And then Neutralizing Workplace Racism Thursday. New book for Friday. Much obliged for the folks tuning in live or archive. Hopefully worthy of your Saturday evening. Sobriety would be best. Under conditions of white supremacy, now they have a name. Chronic cannabis users, now they have a name for that syndrome. You got stomach pains and nausea and all that. Man, I would love to hear I remember Dr. Welsing, she told us, she said they were so overrun with people making requests to get the medical cannabis prescriptions, licenses, and you have to go to a doctor, get an evaluation for that. And she said that they were calling her to see if she could do some of these evaluations for the patients, because she's, medical doctor. She said, man, we got all these problems, health, AIDS crisis, and everything else, the obesity, everything else. And it's no, we don't want you to. You got a few extra minutes to do some of these reefer. What is going on? Like, we're talking about reefer madness. Like, what is going on? Like, where are the priorities at here? Where are the priorities at here? That's question 2. Anywho, Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying, not all white people are racist. Remind us, stop name-calling people classified as black. Even the Haitians, especially the Haitians. Remind us, stop producing throwaway offspring who will be classified as black to be drowned by Susan Smith, raped by Mary Kay Letourneau, poisoned and stuffed with sugar by white people at Nestle. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.